This is Jocko Podcast number 205 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
And with us, once again, is a SOG warrior, Dick Thompson. And we started on podcast 203, so if you haven't listened to that one yet, go back and listen to 203. And we talked for about 3 hours. And now we got to a point where we're going to cover an operation that took place. And Dick actually gave me a document based on this operation called Rest and Recuperation, R&R. So, Dick, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
And like I said, if you haven't listened to 203 yet, you want to get the background for Dick Thompson, SOG warrior, and we're going to jump into this mission once again. The title of this document that Dick gave me is Rest and Recuperation, and I'll jump right into it. As my eyes opened and I became conscious of the world around me, I could hear the buzzing of a large fly, some muffled Vietnamese voices outside of my hooch, and a radio playing "Buy Me a Ticket on an Airplane." This song quickly generated memories of my best friend Bob, who had been killed on a mission a few weeks earlier. He and I had done everything together: basic training, officer candidate school, airborne, ranger, special forces, and volunteered for SOG. We'd been together for over 2 years. This song would forever bring back strong memories of the good times we had together. We had often discussed the low probability of either of us returning to the world. Bob's death had been a significant emotional event in my life, and one thing I was still trying to deal with. So here you are. How long you been in Vietnam for at this point? You and Bob got to Vietnam together. How long you been there for?
6 months or so. Yeah.
So you've been there for 6 months after everything that you've been through with Bob, and Bob gets killed. How did you find out? Who told you?
Actually, I got a letter from a girl that I had been dating, and Bob was dating her best friend. So we were double dating a lot. Mm-hmm. And she found out from Bob's friend, who found out from Bob's parents, and then she wrote me. So I opened his letter up, and there it was. And she said, "I'm sure you've heard by now," and I hadn't. But
so this is snail mail. This is
yeah.
So the family had been notified, then the girlfriend had been notified, and then the girlfriend writes you. We're talking, you didn't find out for a month.
Yeah.
At least. That's kind of crazy. I mean, that's crazy.
Things were slow back then.
Well, not only that, and this is something that Tilt and I talked about, was you guys didn't always get the best turnover of information because everything was so secret. Yeah. So this is an example of everything so secret that your best friend gets killed and you don't even find out about it. You find out about it from your girlfriend's friend, which is his girlfriend.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was down at CCC. So, I mean, we didn't really know what their missions were or what they were doing. So, being on a team, I didn't know what they were doing down there. And, we didn't have, communication back and forth, so I didn't know what he was doing. So it was tough. Plus, mail that you got didn't go directly to you. All mail, if you were sending me, my mother sent me a letter, it didn't go to me. It went to me through another mail center in Vietnam that then sent the mail up to CCN because it had to be screened.
Right.
Because they didn't want anything about classified operations. Mail going out had to be screened. So any letter I sent would, start at CCN, it would go down to Saigon, it would be screened, and then eventually, it would be mailed to her.
So now is this just confirming, like, we talked about on the last podcast that you're thinking you're 22 now. You didn't think you were going to make it to 22. Is this got to be confirming that you're not going to see 23?
Yeah, it kind of got my attention. So.
And the other thing is there's no ceremony. There's no.
Well, there wasn't where we were.
Okay.
I mean, we had ceremonies on a regular basis at CCN for the guys there who were being killed. I mean, people were being killed almost every week. Mm-hmm. But, and every 2 or 3 weeks we'd have, like a memorial service. So.
All right, so back to this story. As I looked up, I could see my car 15 hanging just above my head. I had on my normal sleeping attire, shirt, fatigue pants, and jungle boots. Our compound was hit with rockets, mortars, and ground attacks on a regular enough basis that you had to be prepared to react quickly. Although it was only a little after 9 o'clock in the morning, the temperature inside my room was already in the 90s and I was soaked with sweat. My mind began to travel back through the past 2 weeks and recall how my team had barely escaped the NVA during the last mission. We had made it back to our compound in Da Nang and spent the last 2 days undergoing a very intense debriefing session conducted by our intelligence team in an effort to collect all the information they could about our mission. The next 2 days were mine for R&R. Rest and recuperation before we began preparing for another mission. My plan was to sleep late each morning, eat real food, take several showers, and rest. We had a saying that Da Nang is all right, and it had a lot of meaning right now. Of course, everything is relative. So there you go. You finally got a couple days downtime. You're going to eat some steak and enjoy yourself. This was a Sunday morning, and the mess hall served breakfast until lunch. Soon I was eating and looking forward to the evening meal. Our mess sergeant always managed to have plenty of T-bone steaks every Sunday evening. No one asked where he got them because it was certainly not standard rations for a combat unit. Everyone would grill his steak to his own perfection. This was something we all looked forward to. When you've been on mission for several days or weeks, eating one meal a day, usually rice and fish heads, this was a feast. So you're living large.
Oh, yeah. This is great.
After I finished breakfast, experience told me that I better go make myself invisible until it was time to go back to work. If you could be seen, you could be given work to do while you were on R&R. I decided to go to an off-limits section of Da Nang where we had a safe house. The safe house was a secret location CCN, our unit, owned and protected. It was heavily guarded by mercenaries and only accessible by our people. My get-out-of-jail-free card, which was a special card that authorized us to travel in civilian clothes, carry concealed weapons, enter classified and restricted areas, etc., would allow me to travel into this area of Da Nang even during curfew. This would be my best chance of enjoying the next 2 days. Everything was looking good, and I was beginning to relax. So you get the little get-out-of-jail-free card, huh?
Yeah. I'm not sure everyone had them, but I know some of us did. And it basically said, don't mess with this guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, you couldn't just walk around through the cities and, particularly after curfews and things like that, or you would get picked up. You'd be in trouble. Mm-hmm. But with that card, when I flashed that, they either let me go or they would call the phone number on there and be told, let him go. Mm-hmm. Don't ask him what he's doing. Just leave him alone.
It's legit. Continuing on. The sky had become overcast and it looked like it would probably rain by afternoon. The temperature was steadily climbing and the humidity was approaching 100%. This type of heat and humidity had a debilitating effect on everyone. As I was walking toward the compound's gate, I heard the familiar whoop, whoop, whoop sound of a helicopter. I could see that it was approaching our helipad. There seemed to be a flurry of activity in that area. I was only about 100 meters from it as the chopper landed. The strong smell of JP4 was mixed with the wind and sand that hit my face. The men running around had placed some bags in the cargo compartment of the chopper and were now talking to the crew chief. One of them spotted me and began yelling something at me. The sound of the helicopter prevented me from understanding what he was saying. It was obvious that he was very excited about something. He began to run toward me, still shouting. As he got closer, I heard him yell, LT, do you know how to hook up a Maguire rig? A McGuire rig is a 120 to 150 foot nylon rope with a large loop made out of heavy padded strap attached to the end of it. A bag of sand is tied to the loop to give it the momentum to penetrate the jungle canopy. The other end of the rope is attached to the floor of the helicopter. The rope is stowed inside a sandbag in a manner that allows it to feed without tangling. It is used when team members have to be extracted from the jungle where the helicopter cannot land. The team member sits inside the strap and fastens his left wrist to the strap through a small loop. This prevents him from falling completely out of the rig if he is shot or when he is drugged through treetops during extraction. It would be very uncomfortable and painful to hang by one arm, but at least you would get out. As we ran to the helicopter, he told me that we had a team in trouble with casualties. One of our CH-34 helicopters had gone to the area to attempt an extraction. During the attempt, it had been shot down and apparently exploded and burned on impact. There appeared to be 2 or 3 survivors. Another helicopter had left a few minutes ago to try and help. There were no LZs in the area, just a very high and thick jungle canopy. The McGuire rigs would be needed for extraction. So this is all spinning up, and you're hearing about what's happening. You were, 10 minutes from walking out the gate and being on R&R for a couple days?
Or less.
Or less.
And I thought, I know how to do this. I do it all the time. I'm usually on the other end of that rope, but
Were you thinking when you walked over there? Were you thinking you were just going to rig it?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's why he was asking. You know how to put them in there? And I'm saying, yeah.
So he's just saying, hey, we got to get the McGuire rig rigged. Do you know how to do it? Yes, you know how to do it. Cool. Come on over to the helicopter. And you're thinking, I'll help you guys rig. There's troops on the ground in contact. They need help. Okay, got it. So here we go. I took one look at the gate about 150 meters away as we continued to run. The plans I had for my day were quickly being put on hold as my adrenaline level climbed. In my mind, I could see the smoldering remains of a burned helicopter, dead and wounded crew members, and the bad guys moving in for the final kill. Time was of the essence. I had to quickly rig the helicopter so they could go to the area and get the survivors out. As I approached the helicopter, I leaned my Car-15 and ammunition bandolier against the Connex container. I climbed into the cargo compartment of the helicopter and began working feverishly to attach the McGuire rigs. After a few minutes, the crew chief leaned over to me and said, "The team is in heavy contact. We have to go." At that point, I realized I had been concentrating so much on what I was doing, I had not noticed the pilot had turned up the engine RPMs and the aircraft was beginning to vibrate. In fact, we were lifting off the ground. I pulled the crew chief over to me and said, "I'm not supposed to be on here." He looked back at me and shrugged his shoulders as if to say, "Sorry about that."
That was one of those common sayings in Vietnam. Was sorry about that. I mean, it was just, you saw it all over the place. You heard people saying it. I mean, anytime something was happening like that, it was sorry about that.
Yeah. Anytime something was happening, like you don't have your weapon. So that's a key point. You had set down, you're going to rig this thing. And for anyone that doesn't know, you're on your knees when you're rigging something like that. You're on your knees and you're, got to use both your hands. So you just thought to yourself, oh, cool. Well, since my mission right now is just to rig this thing. What's going to expedite that the most expedite that the most is for me just to put my weapon down over here. I'll get on there, I'll get it rigged, and then I'll get out. That's the fastest way for me to get this done.
Right.
Next thing you know, the helicopter's taken off.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
As I looked down and saw the compound's gate, I saw the compound's gate passed under me. I sat back against the firewall, fastened a seatbelt around my waist, and resigned myself to the fact that my R&R would be delayed a couple of hours. As we flew in, I began to realize that I did not know where I was going, what I was going to do, and was naked. I had left my weapon and ammunition leaning against the Connex. I was flying into combat without a weapon. The only thing I had was my fatigues and boots and a pounding heart. What a Sunday afternoon of R&R this was turning into. About 15 minutes into the flight, my mind began to play out different scenarios of what might happen when we arrived on the battle site. One began to stick in my mind. What if the aircraft ahead of us is shot down? What if the only way to save them is for someone to go down there using the McGuire rig? What if I have to climb down one of the ropes? I don't even have a weapon. About this time, the crew chief pulled me toward him and said, "The aircraft in front of us has been shot down." The team is still in heavy contact and cannot go to the crash site. We'll be there in about 10 minutes. The pucker factor just increased significantly. My premonition was becoming a reality.
Yeah, as I was thinking, I saw this play out. It was like watching a video.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could see the whole thing just taking place. It's premonition. This is what's going to happen. And when he told me, hey, that aircraft is down, I told him, because I had said something to him already. I said, it is happening. It's starting now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a crazy thought that you say to yourself, what if the aircraft ahead of us gets shot down? And then seconds later, he looks at you and says, the aircraft in front of us is shot down.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare. Going on, the crew chief and the other door gunner test fired their machine guns to make sure they were working properly. This brought about a sudden increase in my excitement level. Test firing the door guns always seemed to insert a sense of mortality into what I was about to do. In a few minutes, the crew chief pulled me over again and said, it's just over this ridgeline. I unfastened my seatbelt and crawled over to the edge of the cargo compartment so I could see better. As we came over the ridgeline, we were welcomed by bad guys. A stream of automatic weapons fire with some green tracers mixed in passed by. The loud crack of each bullet could easily be heard over the noise of the helicopter. Both door gunners opened up and began sending a hail of bullets through the jungle canopy. The most fearful part of combat for me had always been getting shot at while in a helicopter. There is no protection. The floor and the sides of a helicopter just don't stop bullets. My arousal level was continuing to climb. The pilot made a quick turn and banked the helicopter on its side. I was looking straight down at the jungle canopy and hanging on for my life. Smoke was coming up through a hole in the canopy where the first helicopter had gone down and burned. As we circled around the steep side of the mountain, we saw another hole in the canopy about 200 meters from the first. When we approached this hole and slowed down, the ground fire coming up at us increased. Shell casings from the door guns were piling up on the floor. Some were falling out. As we passed directly over the hole, I could see the second helicopter lying on its side in a steep ravine. The tail section was broken off, and I thought I saw a crew member still in the aircraft. We circled around and came in for a closer look. This time I could see the air crew was trapped inside the aircraft and fuel was spilling out on them. Any spark from inside the craft or a tracer round would ignite the fuel and burn them alive. The door gunners were continuing to place suppressive fire in the positions shooting at us. It wasn't really having much effect on them. Bullets were coming up at us from all directions. We also detected some movement that indicated the bad guys were working their way up the mountain to the crash site. Something had to be done and fast. I'm trying to think of myself if anything could be worse right now, but I actually can't think of anything worse than this right now.
Well, I knew what was coming. So, I mean, I had already seen it play out. I mean, at this point, there's only one thing you can do. You got to go down there.
Mm-hmm. And these helicopter pilots, these guys are badass. I mean, these guys, for just to be thinking with all this enemy fire coming, they're not going anywhere. They're going to get this done.
And yeah, because they've got...
That's their friends.
Yeah, their friends are down there now. Yeah.
Back to the book here. I told the crew chief to tell the pilot to go back to the crash site and I would drop him a McGuire rig down into the canopy. Climb down to it, then climb down a tree to the ground. So I'm going to say that one more time. Your plan was to throw this rope out of the aircraft, climb down into the canopy somewhere. Once you were getting in the trees, then you would just climb down the trees until you got to the ground. That was your plan.
My stress level was a little high, so I probably wasn't making the best plans that I could, but at the time, that was the only way I could see to get down to him.
When he told him, this is the crew chief talking to the pilot, when the crew chief told the pilot, both the pilot and the co-pilot looked around over their shoulders as if to say to me, "Are you crazy?" The crew chief leaned over and said, "The pilot says you're crazy." I told him to tell the pilot that I might be crazy, but his buddies were going to die a horrible death in a few minutes if we didn't do something. He quickly turned the aircraft around and flew back to the crash site. I pushed out one of the McGuire rigs, and the bag of sand quickly took it into the canopy. We were still receiving heavy ground fire. At this point, we were approximately 50 feet above the canopy. I happened to see that the crew chief had an M16 strapped to the wall behind him. I told him to give it to me. He was a little hesitant at first, probably because he thought he would never see it again. He handed it to me along with a bandolier of 4 magazines. I chambered around and checked the safety and thought, great, I'm going into the middle of the battle by myself with 100 rounds of ammunition. Yeah.
And it gets worse.
I mean, this is not a good scenario in terms of survivability.
No.
At all. At all.
No.
Are you thinking about that, or are you just trying to think of, you're just doing the best you can?
Doing what I got to work with. We got to get those guys out.
I step out onto the skid of the helicopter, confident that I had a workable plan. As I grabbed the rope with my bare hands, I realized it was brand new white nylon rope. New nylon ropes are very slick. I knew it was going to be tough to hold on, but I figured I could wrap my feet around it and make it work. The crew chief leaned over and said, "The pilot says we're receiving too much ground fire. We're going to have to leave." I knew it was now or never. I stepped off the skid and quickly began to discover some flaws in my plan. It's an interesting decision point right there, because you got an out. You've got an out right there of, hey, it's too much ground fire. Sorry, I couldn't get down there. And instead of you saying, hey, sorry, we had to leave, and I'm sorry I couldn't go, you said it's now or never. You stepped off the skid and descended into hell. I could not hold the slick rope tight enough. It began to slide through my hands at a faster and faster rate. After about 30 feet, the white rope began to turn red. It had burned the skin off the inside of my hands, and I was bleeding badly and could not slow down. To make matters worse, the rope no longer reached the canopy. The aircraft was beginning to move because of the ground fire and had lifted the end of the rope about 10 to 15 feet above the treetops. My rate of descent was increasing rapidly, and the only thing that could prevent my death was to be able to hold onto the McGuire rig at the end of the rope. So now the end of the rope is 15 feet above the canopy.
Yeah.
Which means if you fall off of it, you're going to go 10 to 15 feet of airborne, and then you're going to hit the trees. Unknown to me at this time, our tactical operations center in the compound was monitoring the helicopter's radio frequency. I found out later that about this time, a 4th aircraft had arrived in the area and was observing my descent. He radioed my aircraft and asked, "Who the hell is that?" The reply was, "Some crazy special forces guy." At the time, that probably would have been my reply too. When I hit the McGuire rig, I closed down with every ounce of strength I had left, and I stopped. The pain in my hands was unreal. Blood was running down my arms. It seemed as if the bad guys had stopped shooting at the helicopter and were shooting at me. As I looked up, I could see the red streams of tracers coming down from the door gunners and the green tracers going up. The loud cracking sounds of bullets were all around me. I was now swinging on the end of a large pendulum about 10 feet above the canopy. I knew the canopy was about 150 feet above the jungle floor. My strength was gone. It was decision time. I decided that as I swung over the center of the next treetop, I would let go and try to grab hold of something as I crashed through the canopy. Once again, this is ridiculous. This is when I watch a stupid action movie and they show some guy jumping out of a helicopter or jumping off of a cliff and landing in the trees, and I always go, that's BS, that would never work. Apparently I need to spend more time hanging out with you to figure out what's going to work and what's not. So that's your plan. Your plan is you're 10 feet above the 150 foot tall jungle canopy. When you see a good target to jump into, you're going to go. Back to this book. I looked down, and as I centered a treetop, I let go. The fall brought my stomach up in my throat. The sensation was quickly overcome by the impact with the jungle canopy. I grabbed wildly as I crashed through the limbs, but just couldn't seem to hold on to anything. I was moving too fast and was just bouncing off limbs, leaving blood and skin on each one. Finally, I hit a limb with my stomach and wrapped around it. It knocked the breath out of me, but I had stopped falling. After a few minutes, I was able to begin my descent. There was only about 50 feet to go, which means you had tumbled through 100 feet of jungle canopy. This is, again, you might have been thinking the same thing that I like, oh, I can pull this off, until you're falling through that thing. You go, this isn't working the way I thought it was going to work.
I didn't have much, I felt I didn't have much choice.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I couldn't hold on to the McGuire rig. I knew he was fixing to fly away. And all of a sudden, I was going to be much higher. Mm-hmm. And when I fell off, that would be it. At least now, I was 10 feet above something, mm-hmm. and I might have a chance if I let go and dropped into it. But trying to hold on to that thing, I wouldn't have lasted but a couple more minutes, and then that would have been it. Nothing heroic about there. It was, I don't even.
Well, maybe in your opinion, I'm giving you about max hero credit on each and every decision that's being made, whether it was voluntary. Hey, when you said, "Hey, I'm going," that's all I need to hear. When I finally reached the ground, I had to lie behind a tree for a few minutes to rest. At this point, I had very little skin on the palms. My hands are insides of my fingers. Dirt and tree bark were all in my hands. There were numerous other cuts and bruises caused by the fall through the tree. Fortunately, I still had the M16 and bandolier, but I had lost the magazine that was in the rifle during the fall. I was now down to 81 rounds. There was one in the chamber. I could hear the firefight the team was involved in about 200 to 300 meters from me. More bad guys were probably moving around the jungle. A feeling of loneliness crept over me as I realized that not only would the bad guys be shooting at me, but so would the team, because they probably did not know I was on the ground. I moved out rapidly in the direction of the crash site. There was no time to waste. I'd only moved about 50 meters when I heard a twig break to my left. As I looked in that direction, I saw two soldiers with AK-47s about 30 meters away moving parallel to me. Just as I turned my weapon toward them, they both saw me and began to turn their weapons toward me. In the next fraction of a second, I had to decide if they were really bad guys or two of the team members dressed like bad guys. I had practiced an immediate action drill for just such an occasion hundreds of times on our firing range, and used it in previous encounters. My decision was to take them out. As I dove for the ground, I emptied a 20-round magazine on them. It was a tight shot group, and I saw both of them get hit several times. As I quickly changed magazines, I watched and listened for any signs of life from their position. They had gone down in the undergrowth where I could not see them. My attack had been so sudden and violent that they had not been able to return fire. After a few minutes, I decided that those two were not going to cause me any more trouble, so I crawled up the hill a ways and then continued to move toward the crash site. That's that immediate action drill that you talked about earlier. Yeah. Take the shots as you're going down.
You got to do it quick.
And you shoot full auto.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
In that situation, you dumped full. You shot full auto with these guys.
Because I'm moving, and if I can spray a relatively tight shot group,
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've got to hit them more than once. I can't just pop off a couple of rounds. Because if I shoot at one, that gives the other one a chance to shoot at me. So I go for both of them at the same time as I'm going down.
Was the team that you were going to rescue, was that another
it was.
SOG
They were
team?
doing an in-country thing. Yeah.
So you know that they're on the ground out there too.
Yeah, and I knew when I saw these two guys with the AK-47s, I could hear the M16s firing.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew it was not a team that was carrying AK-47s. These had to be bad guys.
Yeah, because going in this, you had if you had spent 10 minutes getting a brief on what was happening, you would have found out how big the team was, what kind of weapons they had, just some little kind of nice to know information, which you had none of.
Yeah.
Your brief was there's good guys down.
Yeah. And sorry about that.
Yeah, and sorry about that. After moving about 150 meters, a shot was fired at me. I thought it sounded strange as I dove for cover. It wasn't a rifle, it was a pistol, probably a .38 caliber. AK-47s made a different and very distinguishable sound. The helicopter crew was shooting at me. The pilot had managed to crawl out of the wreckage, and this is from the downed helicopter. The pilot had managed to crawl out of the wreckage, seen my movement, and begun firing at me with his .38. I yelled at him and told him I was a good guy. He did not believe me and continued to shoot. My experience had been that helicopter pilots were very cool, calm, and in control when they were in the air. The jungle was a different matter. He continued to fire at me until he had to reload. At that point, I rushed him and got the drop on him. He was battered, wounded, bloody, and exhausted, and kept asking me where my other men were. He found it hard to believe that I was alone. I eventually convinced him that it was just me and that we had to get his men out of the aircraft as quickly as possible. I moved him to a very dense location in the jungle a short distance away and continued to go back and retrieve the crew one at a time. Most of the crew had lost a lot of blood and required immediate first aid. They were all injured as a result of the crash. The pilot had broken ribs, a broken arm, cuts and bruises. The co-pilot had a compound fracture of the femur. The bone was sticking out of his thigh. Cuts and bruises. The crew chief had been shot in the leg and the door gunner in the arm. All four were soaked in JP4. A spark would have made torches of them all. I told the pilot that I was going to get help for him and to keep everyone hidden, quiet, and not to shoot anyone unless they physically stepped on them. Yeah. I began to move out toward the other crash site. By this time, that firefight had stopped, and I was not sure where the team or the enemy were. My movement was very cautious because if the team saw my movement, they would open fire, and they would not miss. As I neared the other crash site, I heard some movement up front and some muffled voices. I moved very slowly and deliberately. I heard an American voice. At this point, I could only assume that the enemy had captured one of the survivors from the first crash. My plan was to move in as closely as possible and look for an opportunity to attack and free the American. As I crept closer and closer to the group, I eventually got close enough to see an American sergeant that I recognized. He was the team leader of the team that was on the ground, was still armed, and obviously not a prisoner. So this is about the first good situation that's unfolded.
Yeah.
You got some brothers now that are going to be able to work with you in some way. I got back down behind a tree and yelled at him that I was coming in and for him to have his people hold their fire. After he told me it was okay, I stood up slowly with my M16 in the air and walked toward the group. Once inside their perimeter, I discovered that the loud American voice was that of the American lieutenant colonel who had been the pilot of the first aircraft to be shot down. He was not very happy about what was going on and was giving the sergeant a hard time. Speaking of stress, right? Some of the things that you describe in the stress effect is, anger and not making good decisions and being loud and being confrontational. So this lieutenant colonel is doing all those things.
Yeah, he's being confrontational with a SOG team.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. You do not want to do that.
I informed the lieutenant colonel that I was the senior ground commander and was now in charge of the operation. The fact that a lieutenant colonel outranks a lieutenant did not matter because he was Air Force and we were on the ground. He became very upset and began to threaten me about what was going to happen to me when we got to safety. About that time, the mercenaries on the team had heard enough. Several of them turned their weapons toward the lieutenant colonel and made some very cold and serious remarks. The interpreter told the lieutenant colonel that the lieutenant was in charge and that everyone would do what I said. The lieutenant colonel realized they were ready to kill him if he did not submit. That ended the discussion. So that's what happens when you try and get confrontational with a SOG team on the ground.
Yeah, I mean SOG teams get very closely bonded. They're very closely bonded to the 1011, to the Americans. You don't mess with them anywhere. I mean, they will defend that team. They'll defend those Americans. I mean, even inside the compound, you don't want to mess with them. Mm-hmm. I mean, the compound is kind of like the Old West. Mm-hmm. Everybody there is carrying a gun and is locked and loaded. It's not like the regular military units around that can't have a magazine in the gun. Mm-hmm. We were locked and loaded all the time. You had frag grenades, you had all that stuff, and you got these little pods moving around, and they're autonomous. Don't mess with my guy, because they'll lock and load on you in a heartbeat. So, but now we're out in the jungle, and they see this guy as a threat.
Yeah, a threat to their survival too. Yeah. A threat to you as the leader, a threat to their team, and a threat to the survival. Because if this guy is going to start acting like an idiot, this is going to be a real problem.
Yeah.
So they put an end to that. Our next step was to move back down to the first crash site and recover the bodies. During this time, I discovered that there had been 3 survivors of the original crash: the lieutenant colonel, which was the pilot, a Vietnamese lieutenant colonel co-pilot, and an American sergeant. The Vietnamese and the sergeant had been badly injured and burned in the crash. The second helicopter to arrive on the site had lowered a jungle penetrator, and Lieutenant Colonel had strapped them into it. Unfortunately, as they were being hoisted up through the jungle canopy, the second helicopter was also shot down. As it went forward, the jungle penetrator hung up on a large tree and the steel cable broke. The two men, still strapped to the penetrator, fell approximately 100 feet and landed headfirst on a large rock, killing them instantly. We found the bodies and unhooked them from the jungle penetrator. When I picked up the American and put him over my shoulder, the air rushed out of his lungs. It was the smell of death. As we worked our way back up the hill, it began to rain. So the second one had actually started to extract the team.
Right.
And that's when they got shot down.
Yeah, they were extracting, the wounded from the first aircraft. Mm-hmm. So, and you might want to edit out the smell of death, those little statements, just in case some family members should listen to this. I think Fred's parents are gone now, but he may still have brothers, sisters, or somebody. So, just so it doesn't, sound so bad. Mm-hmm.
Once inside the main perimeter, we laid the bodies down alongside each other. The heads were a bloody mess, and since we did not wear names on our uniforms, I did not know who I had carried up the hill. At this point, I asked the lieutenant colonel who the young sergeant was. The already sickening feeling in my stomach increased tremendously when I heard his name. He was a friend of mine who I had joked with days before. I felt no remorse for the two NVA I had killed an hour ago. But the sight of a dead American, especially a friend, created a range of emotions from deep sadness to extreme anger toward the enemy. One of the first rules you are taught when you arrive in country is not to get close to anyone. But there's no way you can prevent it. We covered them with ponchos and wondered where the bad guys were. My next problem was the pilots. They were still out there alone. I took the 4 team members and moved cautiously to their location and established a security force around them. To get everyone out, I would have to blow down some trees and bring in some helicopter gunships to suppress enemy fire while everyone was hoisted up into helicopters. I had been able to contact the rear using the team's radio and had the necessary demolitions on the way. Yeah, you went in this not only with some other person's gun and 4 magazines, you also didn't even have a radio.
Nothing. Yeah, I was naked.
By the time the helicopter arrived with the demolitions, the weather was closing in. Man, this is just Murphy's Law. The weather was closing in. The rain was coming down harder and the clouds were moving down the mountain. We would have to work fast just to beat the weather. The enemy had been quiet until the arrival of the helicopter. Now we could hear them all around us shooting up at the helicopter. About the time the demolitions came crashing to the ground, the gunships arrived. We signaled our location, and I had the sergeant begin to working airstrikes all around us. While the gunships were keeping the enemy busy, I carried 50 pounds of C4, blasting caps, time fuse, and det cord to a location near the pilots. I placed enough of the demolitions on trees and dropped them. This opened up a large enough hole in the canopy to give us a better chance of not having a repeat of the last jungle penetrator incident. So this is taking time. To sit there and rig 50 pounds of demo on a bunch of trees and then put the blasting caps in. This is taking what, a half an hour to get this done?
Yeah, probably. But I didn't use all 50 pounds. I used just enough to cut the trees and get them down. But yeah, they all had to be rigged. You had to tape the things onto the trees, put the blasting caps in, and set them off. Had to make sure they're not going to fall the wrong way. But that's why they call me dynamite. So I like to blow things up.
The CH-47 that had dropped the demolitions returned and hovered over the hole. As it began to lower the jungle penetrator, the enemy ground fire increased dramatically, and both door gunners opened fire with their 50 caliber machine guns. Not only could we hear the very loud, slow, distinctive sound, but the 50 caliber casings began to rain down on us. After falling 150 feet, they had enough velocity to do a lot of damage. We could see large red tracers penetrating deep into the jungle. The 2 gunships were now raining bullets down through the trees with their miniguns, up to 4,000 rounds a minute per gun, firing 40-millimeter grenades and 2.75-inch rockets with 17-pound high explosive warheads. The popping and cracking sound of the bullets and explosions of the grenades and rockets were exacerbated by falling tree limbs and shrapnel flying in every direction. The darkening sky made the tracers appear very bright. The hot, wet jungle air was becoming smoky and filled with the smell of burned cordite and gunpowder. That's enough firepower going downrange. Like, you can't simulate that. You watch the craziest Hollywood movie and they don't make it look like what you just described right there. By the time the jungle penetrator reached the ground, we had drug the co-pilot and crew chief over to where it landed. We strapped them on as quickly as possible and signaled to pull them up. There was no way to support the broken leg, and we could hear the co-pilot's screams over the battle sounds as he was going up. They say that a compound fracture of the femur is one of the most painful wounds you can have. After seeing the pain he was in, I believe it. The trip up took about 2 minutes. We sent the other 2 crew members up next, followed by the wounded team members, the lieutenant colonel and the 2 dead. The CH-47 left to take them to the hospital. So now you just jump into the CH-47 returned about an hour. During that hour, what's happening? Is the enemy pressuring you?
The gunships are having an impact now.
Got it.
And when they saw the CH-47 leave, that took some of the pressure off. They really wanted to knock it down.
Got it. But the massive air support that you're getting is definitely putting a hurting on the enemy. I mean, that's a lot of gunfire coming their way. Rockets, the whole 9 yards. The CH-47 returned in about an hour with a set of fresh gunships to help begin extracting us. I began putting the team members on as fast as I could while the sergeant continued to work the airstrikes. The jungle floor had become mud and was making the job of hooking people up much more difficult. Eventually, there were just the sergeant and myself left on the ground. Unfortunately, some of the bad guys had moved up close to our position and were beginning to fire at the helicopter. We knew we'd be exposed to their fire as we ascended. We thought we had 2 options: go find them and take them out, or chance being hoisted up with them shooting at us. The pilot narrowed our options by saying the clouds were beginning to cover the hole up and it was now or never. We strapped ourselves on and fired behind each other's backs as we slowly moved skyward, spinning slowly and swinging back and forth and watching the tracers coming by. It seemed like it took an hour to make the trip up, although it was probably only about 2 minutes. Once inside and unstrapped from the jungle penetrator, I rolled over on my back, closed my eyes, and said a prayer of thanks. There was an atmosphere of elation as you were flying away from an encounter such as this. The team members were exchanging war stories. Personally, I was too tired to say much. My mind turned to rest and recuperation and how I was going to make sure that I got rest tomorrow. The team leader was also particularly quiet. Upon arrival at the compound, we were greeted by a small crowd who welcomed us back. It was a really good feeling to be back and to pick up my weapon and ammunition that were leaning against the Connex container. We had been taught in Ranger School to never get more than an arm's length from your weapon. I would not make that mistake again. Lesson learned to every trooper out there. Don't ever do it, not even for a second. I moved directly to the dispensary to have my injuries treated. They treated my hands and other cuts and bruises and told me to return the next day. As I left the dispensary, I was told that the colonel wanted to see me in the mess hall. Maybe he was going to give me an extra day of R&R to make up for this one. So you're pretty much smoked at this point. And
I actually had 2 broken ribs that we discovered. So.
Well, when you drop 150 feet through the jungle canopy.
Yeah.
Man. The colonel was sitting at his table with another full colonel, non-special forces, and seemed to be having a heated conversation. When they looked up at me, they saw a wet, muddy, and bloody person standing in front of them. The expression on their faces indicated that they had lost their appetites. He congratulated me on doing a good job, and then he told me what he and the other colonel had been arguing about. We had left a crew member from the first crash on the ground. Apparently, there had been a crew chief in the aircraft who had been killed and burned in the wreckage. The lieutenant colonel had told us that he was missing a person. The colonel told me to get my team together and be prepared to launch at first light to go in and recover the crew chief's body and destroy the second helicopter. There was a concern that the helicopter had its communication equipment and codes intact. These needed to be destroyed before the enemy could make use of them. The news that I had to go back out there the next morning was not what I wanted to hear. I was tired, injured, and not sure if I could find enough of my team to do the job. At any rate, it would be a long night. On the way to the shower, I found one of my guys and told him to assemble as many team members as he could while I showered. The shower was great, even though I found 3 fat leeches that had crawled under my shirt and attached themselves to my body. They were having a feast at my expense. A squirt of insect repellent made them turn loose. So was your team all on R&R at this point?
Fortunately, the majority of them were still, they were in the compound, so.
Fortunately, I guess. Maybe not fortunately for them.
Yeah.
Fortunately for the team. Later that night, we moved the team members who were going on the mission into the isolation area and made our plan for first light launch. When I awoke, it was raining cats and dogs outside and the wind was blowing hard. The weather continued like this for the next 2 days. The delay gave me time to rest and heal before we inserted. The drawback to the delay was that it gave the enemy more time to discover the body. They knew we would make an effort to recover it. They typically booby-trapped the body, placed others in the area, and liked to plan an ambush to get us on the way out. I had been on several body recovery missions in the past and knew what to expect. The morning of the third day, the weather had lifted, and it was time for the insertion. We loaded up our helicopters and departed for the launch site while it was still dark. At the launch site, we attended the mission briefing with the gunship pilots, forward air controller, our pilots, and the launch site personnel. It was a very detailed briefing with everything from angles of attack, suspected enemy ground forces and fire locations, code words, and the team's route to the helicopter objective discussed in detail. Shortly after that, we were given the word to load up. At this point in the operation, the adrenaline begins to flow. You've just made 3 trips to the latrine, and now you have all your equipment on. You need to go once again. You can hear the slow, high-pitched whine of the helicopter engine starting to get up and get faster and faster. You smell the camouflage paint and insect repellent on your face and JP4 in the air, and you know it's time. I gave the team the signal to lock and load, put the safety on, and climb into the helicopters. Their engines were now turning at full RPM, as were our hearts, and they were ready to lift off. As we began to lift up and move forward, we received the thumbs up from the launch team personnel on the ground. I was sitting in the door with my feet hanging outside so I could get a clear view of the landing zone on the way in and be the first to hit the ground when we arrived. Adrenaline flowing at this point, huh?
Yes.
And you're considering this is pretty much guaranteed to be a hot insert?
That they might not hit us on the LZ, but they definitely would once we got down to where the wreckage was.
Was your plan to insert right on the crash sites, or were you going to insert somewhere offset?
We went in on top of the ridge and then worked our way down.
Okay, so it was an offset. What was the distance?
200 or 300 meters.
Oh, okay, but it's still close.
It wasn't far, but yeah.
Yeah. In my day, an offset insert would be a couple kilometers away. If 200 meters, we consider that on the X. I mean, pretty damn close. 200 meters. I'll go in the jungle. It's couldn't take you some time to get 200 or 300 meters. Right. How long would it take you? How long would you plan for it to take you to get 200, 300 meters?
Well, right from the beginning, we're expecting an ambush any second. So, you're back down to the 100 yards an hour kind of thing. So you're going very slowly down through there. Plus it's very wet, it's muddy, it's slippery. You're going downhill to get down to it, and you're just expecting them to be anywhere.
In the first light, would you guys be taking off the helicopters in the dark, and first light is when the extraction goes, or when the insertion goes, or are you not taking off until there's a little bit of light out?
There's a little bit of light on this particular mission.
Here we go. After about 20 minutes of flight, 2 Cobra gunships came by us, one on each side. They were going to the LZ ahead of us and make a low, slow pass to try and draw fire from the enemy if they were there on the LZ. There were 2 other Cobras trailing just behind us, ready to open fire on enemy positions if we made the mistake of firing on the first 2. We had not anticipated the LZ to be hot, so we were not going to prep it, meaning that the gunships would shoot them up. We wanted to get in as unobtrusively as possible, to the degree you can, with 2 helicopters, 4 gunships, and a forward air controller flying around over the LZ. So the enemy's going to know that you're there, and they're going to know
we're coming back.
Soon the crew chief gave me a thumbs up, indicating the LZ was cold and we were going in. We began to lose altitude very quickly as we made our way toward the small clearing on the ridgeline. As we descended, the air became warmer and humid. When we turned onto the final approach and began our descent, I could feel the helicopter begin to vibrate and my heart rate increase. We all scanned the tree line vigorously for signs of the enemy. All of a sudden, we were only 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and the crew chief was motioning for us to get off. I jumped into the waist-high grass and went down into a prone position. The team members quickly followed, and the helicopters all flew off to a rendezvous point. The sound of them disappearing in the distance created a very lonely feeling. We moved quickly into the tree line and set up a small security perimeter to let our eyes, ears, and nose adjust to the environment. This is an extremely important part of survival in the jungle. The sounds or lack of sounds of bugs, birds, and animals, as well as the smells, tell you what's going on. You must read these signs correctly if you are to survive. After about 15 minutes, we radioed Team OK, moving east. This meant we had not detected any signs of the enemy, and it was okay to release the helicopters and gunships to return to base. We were really on our own now. Standard policy in our unit was that teams would always have at least 2 Americans with them when they were on the ground. This was a team I had been training to operate on special missions without any Americans. They were still in training, and I was the only American on the team. This added to the isolation effect. Did they have any English speakers that were good enough to call for fire?
The interpreter.
The interpreter?
Yeah. The others couldn't.
Did you guys cross-train with those guys so they knew how to call for fire with the interpreter?
Some, but not enough.
Yeah, I think when you say this is a lonely, isolating thing, I think that's the understatement of the century.
But sometimes my thoughts were, if it's just me, I'm the one I have to worry about. If you're with me, now I have to make sure that I protect you. I have to make sure that I get you out if you're hit. I mean, I pick up these additional responsibilities, when I have other Americans with me. Mm-hmm. But if it's just me and the team, and I go down, I go down. Mm-hmm. So, even the one, the previous one where I went in alone, it was a unique feeling to know, I was the bright light team, a one-person bright light team. There were other times where I suggested that I might either go in alone on a mission or go in with 1 or 2 other people, because I don't have a problem being alone out there. So it didn't do that, but
the burden of responsibility of the other person is so heavy,
and it's hard to get them out. I mean, that's why you have so many missing in action from the SOG teams. You can't get them. They get hit, and you're being overrun. You can't get back to get them, and they might still be alive. And everybody says no man left behind, but you got to decide. You come to that decision point where, do I leave Jocko and save the team, or do I get us all killed trying to get your body out? And my position was, I'm not going to get everybody killed. If I can get you out reasonably, I will. But if I can't,
Yeah. And what would I want you to do?
Yeah.
You know?
Because I don't want you to get anybody killed trying to get my body out.
I know. That's the
I'm
same
gone.
thing.
Leave me.
Yep. Leave me. I'll whatever. Doesn't matter anymore.
That's right.
Take care of the rest of the team. Back to this document. From here, our plan called for us to work our way down the side of the mountains, find the crash site, recover the body, destroy the second helicopter, and move to an alternate landing zone for extraction. Altogether, it should be a very simple mission that should take about 5 to 6 hours. Then I could get started on my R&R. We moved very cautiously down the steep, wet mountainside. With every step, you expected to hit a booby trap or have an ambush open up on you. When on the ground, no one talked. Hand and arm signals were all the team communications we used. Silence was critical. Every foot placement was deliberate so as to avoid any noise. A broken twig would signal the enemy of your approach. After about an hour, we stopped for a break. We formed a small perimeter in some very thick brush and put out claymore mines aimed in 4 directions. I laid back on my rucksack and tried to relax while constantly looking for any movement and listening for out-of-place sounds. All of a sudden, I heard what seemed to be a very loud pop and psst. Everyone hugged the ground. Everyone except Huang. Am I saying that right? Everyone except Huang. He had brought a Coke with him. Against my very strict orders. If looks could kill, he would have been dead. He may have just compromised the safety of the entire team and mission. I took the Coke, buried it, and then we moved out. About 30 minutes later, we knew we were close to the crash site. The smell of a decaying body was very strong. You could see the change in the expressions on everyone's faces. If the bad guys were going to get us, it would be around the crash site. We began to move more slowly and cautiously. Finally, I could see the sunlight coming up through the hole in the jungle canopy. We stopped just short of it and sent out a 2-man recon team. They returned without seeing any signs of the enemy. I knew they were out there. I just didn't know where. I set up security around the crash site and stepped into the opening. There was no doubt in my mind that there would be mines and or booby traps in the wreckage. Not only would I have to watch for these, but I would be standing in the open as I recovered the body, a perfect target for a sniper. I could see large concentrations of flies toward the center of the wreckage. Upon careful observation, I saw what looked to be a bone sticking up. I cautiously made my way to the location of the bone while trying to maintain a low profile. Another part of our mission was to photograph everything. I did this quickly and began slowly uncover the remains of the body. Did you have someone assigned to look for booby traps, or was it just every man was constantly on guard and on lookout?
Everybody was looking for it as we moved along, but as I went out there, it was me.
Mm-hmm.
Watch where you put your feet. Watch for wires. Watch for anything that looked abnormal. Because one thing that helped is it had rained hard, so all the powder and materials like that from the fire, had kind of washed away. So you had mostly pieces of metal, bigger pieces of metal and things that you could see, easier than you could when it was all covered with the powder and stuff.
The crew chief had died face down in the middle of the wreckage, and the intense heat of the burning aircraft had burned him into a small charred piece of meat. His legs were completely gone from the knees down. His arms were gone from the elbows out, and something aluminum had melted and burned through his head. When I touched what was left of his skull, it disintegrated into white powder. As I was trying to retrieve his torso from the wreckage, it broke in half at the lower back. When it did, some of the liquid decay flew into my face, some of it on my lips. I almost lost it at this point. It was almost impossible to breathe and just as hard not to throw up. After a few minutes, I was able to get it on a poncho and move back into the wood line. I had seen people burned to death before, but never to this extent. Now that the body had been recovered, we had to find the jungle penetrator and photograph it. The aviation unit did not believe the cable had broken where I'd said it had. They wanted photographic evidence. Before we could do this, however, someone had to be assigned to carry the body. No one wanted to. In fact, they wanted to leave it behind. I became somewhat forceful and directed Huang to carry it. This was part of his punishment for the coke. It took only a few minutes to find and photograph the jungle penetrator. Now it was time to move to the other helicopter. Blowing this one up was going to be the highlight of the mission for me. I always enjoyed missions where I got to use demolitions. My only concern was, where were the bad guys? We recovered the demolitions left over from 3 days ago and carried them to the other crash site. I was really beginning to get the sixth sense feeling that you have just before everything breaks loose. Everything was too quiet. The helicopter was down in a small ravine, a very undefendable place. Just as I communicated the decision to move the 5 team members to the top of the ravine, bursts of AK-47 fire from about 3 to 4 NVA began to hit all around us. The team returned fire as quickly as they moved to the top of the ravine. Since there were only a few of them, I decided to stay with the helicopter and plant the demolition charges. The bad guys shooting at us turned out to be the point team for a much larger group. As I worked feverishly to pack 40 pounds of C4 into the appropriate places of the helicopter, the intensity of fire increased. My hands were beginning to bleed, and blood was dripping out of the ends of my fingers and my gloves. Bullets were now ripping through the floor and the side of the aircraft. Some were even hitting the C4 as I packed it against the instrument panel. Fortunately, C4 requires a detonation device like a blasting cap to set it off. I felt like Houdini inside a chest, except instead of swords coming through the sides, I had bullets. As the battle intensified, I radioed for help. The fight was turning into a war, and we needed gunships now. So there you are, standing in the middle of this crashed helicopter trying to pack C4 and to get that thing completely destroyed. Did you ever think when like something like that, hey, I got a good idea, why don't you guys just drop a bomb on this thing? And by the way, and also when somebody tells me, hey, go search around for this jungle penetrator with a cut cable and take a picture of it, I would have had some issues with that.
I had a lot of issues with the whole thing. They should have told me the guy was there to start with. You know,
right.
The pilot of that aircraft should have said, one of my guys is missing. You know, he should never have been left there to start with. He never said there was another person. He said he had everybody. He didn't. That guy was out there. We could have got him out at the same time we got everybody else out. So, the controversy is brewing around a lot of things between us and the aviation commander over what's going on. But now I'm packing 40 pounds of C4 in there, and I've got a few 100 feet of det cord too that was left over. So I've got that big roll of det cord in there with the C4. They're shooting, hitting it. The thing that bothers me about that is, that means it's coming close to me.
Yeah.
I don't.
That would
like
bother
that.
me too.
Yeah. And I've got the blasting caps. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking once I stick the blasting caps in the C4, if a bullet hits one of those, it's over. Mm-hmm. But at some point you got to do that. Mm-hmm. So had to make the decision, stick them in, ignite the fuses, and try to get out.
How long were the fuses?
No, they're about 3 or 4 minutes. Not long at all. Were
the other guys up on the ridgeline still?
Yeah.
And so you're just on another
I'm down in the
damn dynamite solo mission.
Yeah. I needed them up there because they had a better angle of fire down on the bad guys to keep them back. My plan was to go up there with them. And that having it in the gully and having us back up on the high ground like that provided some shielding for us from the blast that was going to happen. 40 pounds of C4 and a couple 100 feet of det cord, it makes a pretty good display when it goes off. There's not going to be anything left of the helicopter.
No. Once you pull that time fuse, by the way, there better not be anything that delays your exit from the scene.
No, I had to get out. Decision was made. Once you pop those fuse igniters, the decision's made. You got to get out.
You cover that here. Back to this document. After a few minutes, another decision point had arrived. It was time to insert the blasting caps and light the time fuse. The questions going through my mind were, would a bullet hit one of the caps and detonate the C4 before I could get out and move to a safe distance? Could I get out without being hit? I would be completely exposed while climbing out. If I got out, Could I run fully exposed to the bank, climb it 15 feet, and get to the team? That's another horrible thing, because once you pull these time fuses, if you get wounded anywhere in that vicinity, you're done.
Yeah.
It became obvious that they knew I was in the helicopter and were moving in on me. It was now or never. I inserted 2 blasting caps into the C4, ignited the 2 time fuses, climbed out of the side of the helicopter, rolled to the ground, low crawled to the base of the bank, and began to climb like a madman. I'm sure it looked like a contest between me and the enemy's bullets to see which could dig into the ground the most. It only took a matter of seconds, but it seemed like an eternity. My team had really increased their volume of fire to help cover me. As I rolled up on top of the bank, I looked back to see 3 to 5 NVA run up behind the helicopter. If I had waited a few more seconds, they would have had me. Several of the team members looked quickly at me with the same expression of disbelief that I had. Could they really be hiding behind a helicopter that had 40 pounds of C4 and 200 feet of det cord in it with time fuse burning? Were they going to try and pull the fuses out and save the helicopter? It quickly became apparent that they did not realize I had been setting charges. I could see the smoke from the time fuses coming out of the helicopter, but the enemy were so engrossed in the heat of battle that they did not realize that they were about to become history. I signaled to the team that it was about time for the explosion. What happened next was beyond words. There was a tremendous explosion, producing a giant black fireball, followed by a shock wave. You could actually see the compressed air moving out in a circular pattern that literally dazed all of us. There was a momentary lull in the fire as it began to rain pieces of metal, rock, dirt, and tree limbs, and the remains of the NVA who'd been hiding behind the helicopter. The jungle was filled with black smoke. I had wanted a good explosion, and it was a good one, but I had intended for it to be much further away when it had happened. I had intended to be much further away when it happened. The enemy picked up quickly with a new twist. The enemy fire picked up quickly with a new twist. So yeah, that's pretty much, you can't plan that one any better. The enemy, you leave that helicopter with 40 pounds of or 40 pounds of C4 and a bunch of det cord, which for those of you that don't know, det cord is just explosives in a string. And so when it blows up, and it's actually pretty powerful. Yeah. It's actually very powerful, det cord is. So these guys were blown away by this explosion, and all they had to do was see what was going on, walk over and cut the time fuse, and they would have been all right.
I don't know if they still had time to get inside. They'd had to crawl. Somebody had to crawl inside to pull it out.
Oh, okay.
You know? They could have pulled it out and tossed it aside. But when you're watching time fuse burn, it's not like it all burns up to wherever it's burning. Everything falls. It's going down through the middle.
Through the tube,
and you don't know exactly where it is. So, yeah, they might grab it just as it, hits the cap. But we didn't have to worry about that.
Worked out.
Yeah.
The enemy fire picked up quickly and with a new twist. They had moved a machine gun position on the other side of us so that we were now in a crossfire. We were pinned down and couldn't move. We had to get rid of the machine gun or we were all dead. There was a small group of rocks about 20 meters from our position. If I could get to those rocks, I would be able to call back directions to our M79 gunner, and we might knock out the machine gun. The problem was getting across the 20 meters of open terrain with fire coming from both sides without getting hit. They had also brought an RPG and had fired a couple of those at us. Time was running out. I told the team to cover me as I went across the ground like a mole, watching the mud being dug up all around me. The only way I could explain not being hit was that God had put a force field around me. The enemy had begun to shift their fire off of me as I neared the rocks. This seemed strange, but I was glad that I made it. I didn't think much about it. The rocks did not provide as much cover as I had anticipated they would. The machine gun had to be dealt with quickly. I pulled myself over to the edge of the bank and looked over and discovered why the enemy shifted most of their fire off of me. Less than 3 feet from me was an NVA crawling up the bank to get me. I didn't know which of one of us had the biggest look of shock on their face. Probably me. Time began to move in slow motion, and in what was reality was 2 to 3 seconds seemed like minutes. In the next fraction of a second, he squeezed the trigger on his AK-47. The first round just missed my head by what must have been an inch or two. Powder coming out of the barrel was hitting me in the face as the bullets streamed out. AK-47s have a tendency to rise up when they are on automatic, so that the other bullets were going over my head. I squeezed off a burst of 6 to 8 rounds from a distance of less than 3 feet. They all hit him in the face and the top of his head, causing it to explode, sending debris all over me. As his body tumbled down the bank, I could taste the blood that had hit me in the mouth. The fire immediately shifted back on me, and I was hugging the ground so close that I must have looked like an empty pair of fatigues lying on the ground. Nevertheless, I felt an occasional bullet hit my rucksack. Fortunately, the radio was not damaged. A green tracer ricocheted off a rock and landed right in front of my face. I watched it lie there and burn. As I continued to fire at the enemy, the handguard on my Car 15 became so hot I could no longer hold it. I was having to shoot one-handed. I shouted back directions to the M79 gunner. His first shot was high and off to the left. I continued to direct his fire until he had hit a tree beside the machine gun, sending shrapnel into the position. The 2 NVA were wounded and momentarily stunned. This gave me a chance to put 10 to 12 round burst on them and silence the machine gun for good. Oh, man.
Yeah, it was an exciting afternoon.
Yeah, that's completely crazy. I can't imagine sitting there as all this machine gun fire is happening and the tracer settles itself in front of your face and you sit there and watch it burn. About this time, 2 helicopter gunships arrived. I marked our position initially with a flare gun and then with purple smoke grenade. After they had identified our location, I directed their minigun 40mm grenade and rocket fire into the enemy. The gunships were literally ripping the trees, ground, and enemy apart. Even though we had already killed a lot of enemy, there were still 20 more shooting at us. The gunship spotted the enemy more enemy further down the ridge, moving toward us, and fired rockets on them to slow their progress. I worked the airstrikes in as close as I could to our position and eventually was able to suppress the enemy fire enough to crawl back to the team. So far, only one team member had any serious wounds. Shrapnel from one of the B-40 rockets had hit him in the back. It was not life-threatening at the moment, but he was in a lot of pain and bleeding. We were beginning to run low on ammunition, and the enemy force was increasing. The time had come to break contact with the enemy or die in place. Yeah, you were going. In order for your Car 15 to get that hot, that you were shooting a lot.
Yeah.
How many rounds did you go in with?
On a SOG mission, I usually carry around 50 magazines.
Did you say 50?
50.
50 magazines.
Oh, of course, we had the little ones.
Yeah, those are 20 rounds.
Yeah, but yeah, because even though I was the leader, I still tended to engage the bad guys.
Mm-hmm. So you're in there, and what about for this one where you're kind of high potential for contact?
I don't think we had that many. I don't remember exactly how many I had, maybe 30 or so, but, a little less than I.
How did you even load out 30 magazines or 50 magazines? I mean, you could only fit so many on your web gear.
With a canteen pouch, you can put 5 20-round magazines in it. So I would carry 2 of those at least on the belt, and then I'd put the others in the rucksack. So like on the left side, I'd have 10 magazines, because you got to put the magazine in with your left hand. Yeah. The right side, I'd have 1 or 2 bags of grenades, because I could put usually 5 of those in a canteen pouch, and you can throw right-handed. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to have to be rolling and turning. I tried not to put anything, besides the med kit, which was pretty flat, the gauze pads and things like that, my compass on the front so I could get closer to the ground. And then in the rucksack, I'd load it up. I was wondering, everything was so heavy. And then, you had to have a couple of quarts of water on the belt, and sometimes more in the rucksack. You had the Claymore mines in the rucksack.
How many Claymores would you usually carry?
I usually carried 2. And depending on the size of the team, everybody else might have 2. But claymores are heavy.
Yeah, yeah. Would those be rigged? The ones rigged with like 5-second or 10-second time fuses?
We had the fuses depending on what we wanted to do with them.
And then you also had a rig for perimeter security that you could clack off.
Yeah. We carried a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's to be in these kind of firefights, to shoot your weapon enough that it's hot, and to be sitting there under that fire directing. I mean, these are crazy things. You can barely even capture what your chances of survival in a situation like this are. The chances are not good. Let me put it to you that way.
With the original M16, the handguard would get hot, but the regular troops rarely fired them that much. They would get warm. But with the Car 15, it had a different type of handguard up front, and with the amount of firing that we were doing, and the thing was 110 degrees to start with, and then you start putting those rounds through there as fast as you can. Very quickly it would get hot. Most Americans wore gloves, and I particularly had them on this time because I didn't have any skin on the inside of my hands. A lot of the muscle and meat was gone. And we cut the fingertips out, so we had some dexterity to do things. And I would put a piece of canvas around the handguard, and that would just give me a little extra protection until it got hot. And then, just the one-handed thing, having the small rope go through the little sight bracket up there and hooked into the snap link on your shoulder, you could put pressure down on that. It made it easier to shoot one-handed and be able to hold it down, because it's going to try to come up on auto. But you could do that. It was a little uncomfortable on that mission because of my hands. But the good thing about your hands is all of that skin will grow right back. It didn't take it long. It'll come back. Other places on the body, it doesn't come back that fast.
All right, so you guys are running low on ammo, and here we go back to this document. I signaled the team to get ready to move out and radioed to the gunships what we were going to do. As they made their next run, firing miniguns, 40-millimeter grenades, and rockets, myself and 2 team members exposed ourselves long enough to throw white phosphorus grenades as far toward the enemy as we could. When they exploded, each produced a very dense 30-meter radius of white smoke and streams of burning phosphorus. The smoke didn't stop the bullets, but it did prevent them from seeing our direction of escape. We quickly dragged the body and the wounded team member into the thick jungle and began slipping and sliding up the mountain. I radioed the gunships that we were clear to make their next pass directly over our old position, marked with a red smoke grenade, estimating that the bad guys would be there by then. It was a good move, resulting in the gunships killing several of them where we had been. The gunships continued to pound the area for another 20 minutes, sending thousands of bullets, hundreds of 40-millimeter grenades, and dozens of rockets through the jungle canopy onto them. Once again, the weather moved in on us very quickly, and the rain began to come down hard. Before we were halfway up the mountain, the clouds had already covered the ridgeline. We would not be distracted that day. Tired and somewhat demoralized, we continued to climb toward the top of the mountain. We had, at least temporarily, broken contact with the enemy. Eventually, we found a very dense, rocky, and steep peak we thought we could defend. The rain continued the rest of the day and throughout the night. That's a morale crusher.
Yeah.
You're low on ammunition. You think you're making your final, movement, and then you're going to get extracted, and then the weather comes in and you're shut down.
Yeah, it didn't go over well with the team. I mean, it had a significant impact on the morale, because I really thought that once we got up here, we would get extracted.
Yeah.
But not once the weather rolled in. Then I knew, man, we're going to be here at least until tomorrow, and things just don't work out.
As a leader in that position, what is it important for you to do as a leader as that morale starts to slip.
Part of what I was doing with them was congratulating them, because this was one of our first heavy firefights as a team. So pumping them up, how well they did, how we destroyed all those guys. We got the body that we went down after. So just trying to tell them, you really did a good job. So Wayne, don't ever think about bringing a soft drink, on a mission again. Yeah.
That still, okay, so you give them like a pep talk, hey, you did great, but they got to be looking at you, hey, thanks a lot, boss, and now we're here, and the enemy that we just killed a bunch of enemy, what are they going to do? They're going to come after us.
We've got to keep the guard up, pay attention. You can't dwell on what's happened. The weather will clear when it clears. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we got to stay sharp. And we're in a good position. If they try to come up, we'll take them out.
This is like the ultimate form of when people get in competition of some kind and they think they win, and then it turns out they don't.
Yeah.
I got a buddy named Tim Kennedy who's actually a special forces guy, great guy, and he was actually a UFC fighter, a mixed martial arts fighter, incredible fighter. But he had a match against a guy, and the guy he was going against was an Olympic champion guy, a really tough guy, and Tim was beating him. And I think it was between the second and third round, the opponent didn't answer the bell, so he didn't come out to fight. And then the corner man, there was some shenanigans going on, and all of a sudden, with an extra 30 seconds of rest or whatever, the guy stood up and ready to fight. And now Tim Kennedy, who had just thought he had won because the guy didn't answer the bell, they go, no, it's not over. You got to fight. And hearing him tell that story to me, he said it was this situation, right? All of a sudden, he thought he had won, thought the day was done, raised his hands in victory, and then all of a sudden, no, you got to fight again. And he didn't. He told me, he's like, I didn't get back in the game, and he ended up losing that fight. And that, unfortunately, that fight would have put him in the slot to be the UFC champion, which he absolutely should have been. But it reminds me of this, and you as a leader have to take these people in that moment where they could let down their guard, they could get demoralized, they could give up, and instead say, nope, guess what? Okay, hey, good job. We got to make it through tonight. We're not done yet. Yeah,
and that happens all the time. I mean, Cunningham, the first guy to be an ace pilot in Vietnam, when they shot down the fifth aircraft. And then the mission was over. They shot down that MiG, and they turn and go home. And he and the co-pilot, they're patting each other on the back. Man, we're aces now. We've done this. That was great. And then just going back and forth. They didn't hear the missile alarm go off. Fortunately, they were almost back to the coast when the missile hit them. They had to punch out. They landed in the water and got picked up out there. But they were celebrating so hard, they let their guard down. They thought it was over.
It ain't over till it's over.
That's right.
And in this particular case, it ain't over yet. Here we go. Back to this document. Even though the mission was supposed to have been a 5-hour mission, I'd made everyone bring 2 meals just in case. The team members had grumbled about the extra weight, but no one was grumbling now. Nor did they during the next day. As the rain continued, we spent almost 48 hours on that little peak, constantly watching, listening, and feeling for the enemy before the weather cleared and we were extracted. Needless to say, everyone was very excited to climb on board the helicopter and head for home, even though the smell was terrible. I was really looking forward to some time off to let my body and mind heal. When we arrived at the compound, however, I discovered my team was scheduled to begin preparing for a new mission the next day. R&R would have to wait. 3 months later, I was awarded the Air Medal with the V device, second award for heroism during aerial combat for my actions on May 4th, 1969. The first trip, I was also awarded the Bronze Star Medal with V device for heroism in ground combat for my actions on May 7, 1969. The second trip.
And it was worse. When I got back.
What? Please tell me what was worse than that, because and whoever wrote up you for a Bronze Star for that, no disrespect, but I'd like to slap that person right in the face, because that is ridiculous. That entire thing is ridiculous.
So when I got back, we had the aviation guy there with our colonel again, and he's saying, "You blew up my helicopter?" I'm saying, "That's what you told me to do. Destroy the helicopter." He said, "I didn't tell you that. You were not supposed to destroy it. You know, just put a thermite or something on the radios, but not destroy the helicopter." I don't know what he thought he was going to do with it.
Yeah.
But I said, well, that joker's in a million pieces out there. It's gone. Yeah. So,
next time, do it yourself.
I didn't quite go that far. I might have been thinking that, but I was not happy when I heard that. I wanted to hear, "Hey, man, you did a great job.
Yeah.
Why'd you blow my helicopter up?"
Wow. So, that's disconnected. That's a very disconnected person, a very disconnected leader. Unbelievable. So that's just completely crazy. And did you get wounded during that mission?
No, just banged up a little bit. No.
Just banged up a little bit.
I mean, it wasn't uncommon to get hit with shrapnel or something. Mm-hmm. But I got the broken ribs and burned hands and all of that, with the first part of it. But the second part, I just got skin up and stuff.
So now what's the next? Let's see. That was in 2 to 7 May, and then the next thing we got is a King B down. So one of the King B helicopters goes down.
That wasn't a good day. So I take RT Virginia, and we go on a mission, and I think that's the one where it was the NVA division or regiment heading for Hamburger Hill. We were supposed to go find them and then bring airstrikes and things on them, try to stop them, because Hamburger Hill was a very political battle that happened. The 101st was trying to fight their way up to the top of this mountain, taking all kinds of casualties, and everybody was questioning at the time, why do they need to go up there? Why do they got to take the high ground? It'll be a political victory that, as well as military, if we take it. They were taking all kind of casualties. The North Vietnamese had this large unit that was coming that was going to crush that battalion. Mm-hmm. And, so our mission was to go out, find it, stop it, don't let them get there. They had moved a lot further along than we thought. So we do our little circling around thing, and as we're coming in on short final, they opened fire, hit the aircraft. We lost power. And, I'm sitting in the door, and I'm watching the ground come up and thinking, this is not good. Mm-hmm. Man, we're going to really smack in. And we did. So it hit the ground. Everything went black. And, then my eyes come open, and I'm laying there thinking, am I alive or dead? And then I hear the bullets cracking by, and I'm thinking, I must be alive because somebody's trying to shoot me. So I look around, see what's going on. I get my guys who are scattered out on the ground too. I drag them over into a bomb crater that's there, so we had some protection. They eventually got the helicopter flying again, even though it had taken a lot of hits, but he got it back in the air somehow.
Was the King B pilots, these were South Vietnamese pilots?
South Vietnamese, but yeah, they flew for us. They were our guys.
Yeah.
So we're in the crater fighting. They can't get back in. The ground fire is way too heavy. We're working the airstrikes. We're working the A1Es. We're hitting the whole ridge line. We're hitting the top of the hill, getting secondary explosions up there, because they'd already moved a lot of ammunition and stuff up on the hill. So we're smoking it pretty hard, but they can shoot right across the top of the bomb crater, so it was kind of hard to stick your head out. Everybody's busted up. I'm experiencing, a tremendous amount of pain, and I'm not quite sure where's this coming from. I'm hurting. It's hard to breathe, all that kind of stuff. But, we're getting a lot of kills. They're trying to crawl out there to us. And then eventually we suppressed the fire enough that one helicopter was able to come in and took everybody on the team except for myself and one guy. So the two of us stayed there in the bomb.
Now, is that because of the crowd, of the too many people? Is there a tactical reason to do that?
In this case, I wanted somebody else with me. Mm-hmm. And that we were loading the aircraft down. We were really putting too much weight on it.
So the fear was if everyone got on that, the King Bee wouldn't be able to take off.
Right, it would go down.
So two of you are going to stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's a question kind of like we talked about before. Sometimes you have to weigh the good of the many against the one, and for us, the best solution was for us not to get on the helicopter. Mm-hmm. We would stay there. If we got out, we got out. If we didn't, we didn't. But the rest of the team, would survive. So, so they went away. We're still, doing a lot of shooting, working gunships and stuff. And then I just got a little irritated, and I thought, I need to go get one of them. I think what I'm going to do is just crawl out there, because I know they're crawling around out there in the grass. I'm going to crawl out there and get one of these jokers.
Mm-hmm. Meaning you're going to go and capture a live enemy.
So, I told Cubby.
Because you're right here now, you got two people, two of you, you're injured somehow, you don't really know what it is, you're in a bomb crater, you're surrounded by an NVA division, and you think, now's a good time to go and capture someone.
If I'm going to get somebody, this may be my last chance. So,
check.
I want to snatch one of those jokers up, because if we can take him back, he could give a lot of intel about where they are, what they're doing, and everything. So I start crawling out there in the grass. The grass is about that high, about 2.5, 3 feet high. And I'm crawling around out there, and I can hear them, because they're shooting. They're still shooting down at the bomb crater. They haven't realized that I've crawled out there with them. And I can hear there's one up in front of me, and I'm crawling up there. And I said, if I can get the timing right so that he doesn't see me, immediately, then, I can probably wound him, drag him back in, and, he'll be ours. It just didn't go well when we had the encounter, so I more than wounded him. And, so I didn't have a prisoner.
Did you shoot at him, or did you stab him?
No, I shot him. Yeah, there are times to use a knife, but sometimes you need to do it quick. Mm-hmm. And, if he's got buddies, you can only reach so far with a knife. But with that CAR-15, you reach way out there and tap somebody. Yeah. So I decided to go back in, because I didn't have any strength. And I wasn't sure what was going on. So I got back in. Eventually we suppressed the fire enough that they were able to come back in and get the two of us. And went back to the launch site, and they said, that was good, but there's still a ton of them out there, and I need you to go back in tomorrow morning. So take the team back. So I replaced some team members. And
why'd you have to replace team members?
Because some of them were injured, when the helicopter crashed in. So. And
what about you? You're back. And
I got with the medics, and they drugged me up. And they said, with an impact that hard, you're bound to have some some bruises and whatever. And I said, man, this is not a bruise. I mean, it's hard to breathe when I move. But anyway, they said, we really need you back out there tomorrow morning. I mean, this is critical. Okay, we'll go do it. So we go back in.
Same insertion point?
No, we moved over to a different location, a few clicks away from that first one, and went in. And right after we got on the ground and we started into the jungle, we made contact. So all of a sudden we were in heavy contact there, and trying to suppress that fire, working the gunships and things that we had with us. Got it suppressed enough that we were able to get, again, all but me and one of the guys out on strings and lifted them out. So the two of us were still there, still working the airstrikes. And we were in a better position at this point to really hit the main body of the force. And, we had that big stick with us, and we were hammering those guys. I mean, literally thousands of them were killed, that morning. I mean, we pretty much decimated, that force. They did not go.
What was your? Were you in an elevated position?
Yeah. So we were up pretty close to the top of a mountain, and we could see them in the valley. We could see them on the ridge line coming up to where we were. We could see them on the ridge line where we had hit.
Did they know where you were?
Yeah. I mean, from the fire that was going on, they knew we were up there, but they couldn't get up there to us, except for the ones that were already there, because now we had a big enough air support team with us out there to just smoke them. We had the SPADs, the A1Es, we had the F4s and gunships, and just rotating those things in. I mean, they were stacked out here waiting on their turn to come in and go after them. But from where we were, I could see them. And we had, pretty significant contact right there and where we were, directly on us. And for some reason, it just seemed like a good idea to take one of them back with us.
Oh, so you got the notion again that you're going to try and capture
So
someone.
I thought, it's different terrain.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I crawled out there, with covering fire from my little guy.
Mm-hmm.
Encountered a guy, and I didn't have the strength to manhandle. I wounded him,
Mm-hmm.
but I was hurting so bad I just didn't have the strength. I mean, under normal conditions I could have brought him back, but I was in too much pain, so I had to let him go to
Mm-hmm.
happy hunting ground and wherever, and crawl back. And later on that day, myself and the other guy were able to come out on strings, and then they really hammered the place there.
How long were you on the ground for on that one?
Most of the day. So it was a long time. And, when we got back, they said, I think there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, I think so.
By the way, the NVA, that element of NVA, of thousands and thousands of NVA, did they ever make it to Hamburger Hill?
No.
So that's why
That's why, the 101st was not wiped out. They did finally make it to the top. And once they got up there and said, we're the king of the hill, they were told, okay, come on back down.
When that kind of stuff was going on, what did you guys, was that, we look back, armchair quarterback, and say, what were they thinking? What were you guys thinking? When you guys hear about that, would you think, what the hell is the leadership doing?
What are we doing? I mean, why would you do that? Why would you sacrifice that many lives? And I forgot now the exact number, but it was a lot of Americans killed trying to get to the top of that hill just to turn around and walk back down.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it wasn't just that. It was a big political move and everything, but it's just my opinion that I don't think it was worth losing people like that if you're going to turn around and go back down.
Right. Now, did you guys think about that? Did you talk about that? Did you guys look at each other and say, what the hell are we doing? Why would we make this choice?
Sometimes when we would get back, the team members the American members sitting around, sometimes we would say, man, did you hear what happened? and questioning, some of the political things that were going on.
Because now it's 1969.
Yeah.
So this is like the height of the American anti-war movement right now. This is like Woodstock's coming and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Are you guys hearing any of that?
We are hearing some about the protests, but, we didn't get to see. I mean, we didn't have TVs and have stuff like that. We didn't see what was going on. If you got a hold of an Army Times, you might see something in there, but a lot of stuff was held back because they, didn't want us being exposed to it. But you knew, and you had heard from people who were coming in more recently, things that they had seen. You knew that you were likely to be spit on in the airport or on the street if you were in uniform. And it was...
What are you thinking about that? I mean, can you even fathom that?
Well, I wasn't happy about it. And, there were a lot of hijackings of planes going on at that time, too. So, not by protesters, but by different people hijacking them to fly to different countries. And, one of my thoughts was, this Browning high-power 9mm that I took off of a NVA, I'm carrying that with me on the plane. My plane is not going to be hijacked. It would be the hijacker's worst nightmare to try to stop my plane. So I carried it with me, and I had it when I went through the airport. I did get spit at. I got called baby killer, all kinds of things like that, from various groups in the airport. So it was not the welcome home kind of thing that you see today. Although I don't think we do a very good job today. We do a lot better than we did. So, I wasn't happy about what was going on.
So you were about to say, before I cut you off, you were about to say that you get back and now you're saying, hey, there's something I think there's actually something wrong with me. Yeah.
They decided at the time that I had severely bruised my back and maybe some vertebrae, and I think I broke another couple of ribs. I don't remember right now, but I think it was a couple of ribs broken too, and beat up, cut up. But then it was determined later that I had fractured my spine and a couple of vertebrae, and they just couldn't believe that I actually went on a mission like that and was able to do what we did. So
would they give you a couple days downtime and some Motrin?
Oh, they promised that, and then they said no. Yeah, I got a few days downtime after that. But yeah, I ate Motrin like it was candy. So.
And then it was okay. You got
eventually, by the time the next mission came around, ready to go.
And was you have a note in here about the POW mission? Is that after you got home?
No, I'm still over there.
Okay.
So we got intel. Excuse me. We got intel all of a sudden that said there was a small group, 10 to 15 American POWs that were being moved north. And the intel said, we know where they are. So they said, we need to get them. So that became the mission, but it was going to be an intense combat kind of mission. So what we did was we created a spike team. So a buddy of mine, Bruce Lombard, and I would do that sometimes. We would put our two teams together, so we'd have about 20 or so people to take out there. We took a medic with us this time. We were loaded for bear, 2 machine guns, all this, extra ammo and everything. And our mission was to go out and find them and get them back. So we went to the launch site. We were supposed to launch in the next day. There was a hatchet force that was there too that had a mission to go. I don't know what their mission was, but they were going somewhere. And we had a team, Dennis Neal and Michael Brown's team was on the ground. They had finished their mission. They moved back to an extraction LZ. They had called for extraction. And then all of a sudden they called a prayer fire emergency, that they were being overrun. And then we lost contact with the radio contact with the team. One of the aircraft, one of the aircraft out in the area heard a transmission on the little URT radio that just operated on the guard frequency. They picked up what they thought was an American voice saying, somebody help me, for God's sake, somebody help me. They heard that voice, and that was all we heard. And so everything at the launch site stopped, because now it's a prairie fire, and we've got to go get Dennis's team. And, and that was a situation where I didn't have a 2-day R&R coming up, but I'm looking at the aircraft that's about to go out to try to bring them back, and I'm thinking, I probably should get on that aircraft. I think I should go with them. And then I'm thinking, geez, I've got to lead my own mission to get POWs, in a couple of hours. I've got to go do that. I can't jump on, this aircraft and fly out there. That's not going to work. Mm-hmm. So I didn't go. They went out into the area. They saw some movement. They saw, what they thought were good guys. They dropped the McGuire rigs down, and as they were lifting off, 3 of them pulled tight, and then 1 of them shot loose, and they came on up. They had 2 indigenous personnel on the McGuire rigs, and the crew chief said he thought he saw an American on that 3rd one that popped loose, that he thought an American had gotten in there and fell out as they were, pulling the tension up. But they were receiving so much fire, they couldn't go back in there. So they brought the 2 survivors from the team back to the launch site, did a quick debriefing from them. They said everybody else was dead. They launched the Hatchet Force to go in as a bright light team. They changed their mission to bright light and decided to put them out there because there were so many bad guys in the area. But they inserted them a couple thousand meters away from where the extraction site was. They were pinned down on the LZ. They never moved anywhere. They just got into the tree line, and that was as far as they could go. So once that started happening and they saw they couldn't go anywhere, then they came to me and said, your mission's changed. You are now the bright light team. So got all my guys together and said, okay, we're going bright light. The other mission we'll do later. So then, we planned the mission right quick, and they inserted us, the whole Spike team. So, that's 5 aircraft going in. They said, it's a really hot area, so we'll prep the LZ, but we have to be careful because we don't know where the other team members are that might be out there. So we can't just hammer the whole area. We can only prep it right around the LZ. So they went out, the gunships ahead of us. They prepped the LZ. And, I'm listening on the headset, and it's not sounding good. And, I knew we were going to get hammered because they were going to open up on us as soon as we got close. And I was in the lead ship. And as we started in, bullets are coming everywhere. The aircraft's taking hits. The ones behind me are taking hits. But we went on in, got on the ground, got that first load into the tree line, brought in the rest of the guys, one ship at a time, working airstrikes, right around us to suppress the fire as much as we could. So we spent until the next afternoon mostly fighting, looking for Dennis's team, trying to find any survivors that we could. So it was a long night, and they were firing mortars over at the hatchet force. We could hear them from back up behind us. I mean, I would call them and say, rounds on the way, because I'd hear them drop it in the tube and doosh, and I just tell them, you got incoming, you get everybody down. But we couldn't get to where the mortars were because we had, too many people around us. And when it got daylight, we were still looking for more, looking for Dennis more. We discovered we were in the middle of a bunker complex. Bunkers were all around us. And that's one reason that the LZ prep didn't have much of effect. They were in their bunkers. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, we brought in a lot of air support, eventually got out. Dennis's team was never found. So, and the two survivors, there's no doubt in my mind that they gave us the wrong location where the team was when it was overrun. I don't think they did it intentionally. Mm-hmm. I think it was distress. I think it was being chased, trying to survive. I think they lost track with how far they moved to get to where they were picked up from.
Because otherwise you would have found something?
We would have found something. Now, you can go out there and you can find people who've written all kinds of things about Dennis's mission and that nothing, no evidence was found and things like that. I was there. I was the guy on the ground. I searched that area. I know what was there. And Dennis was my roommate, so we were already very close, and so I had that personal stake in finding his team, and we just didn't make it. So we came back. So our mission for the PWs was postponed. And we went back down and started replanning that mission again, because according to intel, they had moved more. So we had to pick a new site to go into and kind of think through it a little differently. And it turned out to be probably one of the most interesting missions that I had. Maybe one of the most unique in SOG because of a couple of things that happened.
Well, like what? It's really interesting that if anyone listened to this podcast, I had on one of the guys I've had on the podcast was a guy named Colonel William Reeder, and he was a helicopter pilot that was shot down 2 times, and the second time he was shot down, he was captured, and he was one of those folks that was being moved from South Vietnam to the north, which was actually the worst possible thing to have happening, and guys died on those treks, and this was them, the stereotypical image that you get of the Vietnam prisoner of war in the jungle. That's what these guys were going through. So the guys in the Hanoi Hilton that were, at least they were identified, people knew that they were there, etc. These guys in the jungle, they were just getting, every horrible thing that could possibly happen happened to those guys. So when you talk about the fact that you knew, you had intel, this is the type of person that I'm thinking that you're going to save. Right. Someone like Colonel William Reeder, who, the stories that he told about being captured, and at one point he was in a 2-foot tall bamboo cage. His legs are shackled. He's in the middle of the jungle. He hasn't eaten, and he's trying to get some sleep, but he can't sleep because the rats are gnawing at the wounds in his legs. Yeah. So that's when you say, hey, you got an opportunity to go capture these guys, that's what I'm thinking about. And you're doing all this just on top of, losing your friend, your brother, Dennis Neal, who completely, disappears. So what changed about the mission? What did it start? What made it so unique?
We were going into a different location, different route. But other than that, the beginning was basically the way it was supposed to go. when we got canceled before. We go in relatively uneventful, and we get on the LZ, and it's the big team. So Bruce and I have our teams together, and it's a big one. And we start moving up the ridge line. It was kind of a late insertion, not last light, but kind of late. We start up the ridge line. We get a few hundred meters up there, and then we stop, for the night. Because you got a big group now. It takes longer to get everybody in position, get set up, get all the claymores out, get everything the way you need it. So now we have a larger perimeter. I'm in the center of it. Bruce is, close to me, but I know where he is. And what was interesting was, it got dark, and the weather is starting to get bad, but it's dark, and you can't see your hand in front of your face. Mm-hmm. And I'm leaning against a tree, my rucksack behind me. I got my car 15 across my lap, like I normally do. And I'm just about asleep, and I hear a twig break. And my eyes open, and I'm thinking, wow, did I just hear a twig break? And then I hear another one, and I'm saying to myself, that's directly in front of me. There's somebody in front of me that's moving in this direction. So now I'm listening, and I'm saying, yeah, somebody is coming directly at me. And I'm thinking, how did he get through the perimeter? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're not spaced very far apart at all. Mm-hmm. How in the world could this guy have walked through our perimeter and he's on the inside now, and he's coming, straight at me? And so I'm playing all those thoughts in my mind, and he's getting closer. And now I've got my adrenaline going. I got my super senses working. And even though it's so dark I can't see anything, I can visualize him in front of me. I can literally see a black silhouette in my mind, because I'm tracking the sound. I can hear him breathing, and he's coming right at me, and I'm thinking, this is not going to be good. This guy is going to walk right into me. And so I've got to make a decision. If I just shoot him right now, it's going to light me up, mm-hmm. Like a neon sign, and all of his buddies are going to open up. I've got to do something. He's about to step on me. So I've got the selector switch on full auto. I got my weapon in the hand, and I'm tracking mentally this silhouette. And when it gets in my mind where he's within reach, my plan was I'm going to reach out and grab a hold of him. I'm going to cram the barrel of the car 15 into his head, and I'm going to pull him. He'll be off balance. I'll pull him and bring him down to the ground. If he fires his weapon, if he yells, if he makes any kind of sound, I'm just going to put a 3 or 4 round burst into his head. Mm-hmm. And of course that'll light me up, and everybody will start shooting at me, but I can't let him be in there. So when he got within range, I reached up, I grabbed him. At this same instant, the gun hit him in the side of the head, cut a big gash in his head. I pulled him down. He hasn't said a word. I jerked him right down to the ground, and the gun is there. And I'm saying, now what am I going to do? I mean, I've got him, mm-hmm. but what am I going to do with him? And all of a sudden, I hear him whisper, Chung-Wee. He's saying, Lieutenant, lights. And I'm thinking, what? Lights. And I realized we had a Vietnamese captain with us, Vietnamese Army captain, and he had seen something, and he was coming to tell me, because he wasn't used to going out with us, and he was coming to tell me. And I've got him down on the ground now with a gun stuck halfway through his head, and he's saying lights and lights, and I look up, and I'm looking up the ridge, up toward the top of the mountain, and all the way from the top of the mountain, about halfway down the ridge, are just lights. Now, I thought, there might be flashlights, but I think there was some kind of a lantern, and there was just a stream of people coming down the mountains. So I led him up. I looked back down the ridge, and there's a stream of lights as far as I can see down the ridge coming up. The guy that's monitoring the radio right then says, "Sir, you need to hear this." He hands me the handset, and I respond, and what I hear is, "You are now a prairie fire emergency." This is coming from SOG headquarters down in Saigon, being relayed to tell us that we are a prairie fire emergency. And I'm thinking, I didn't know that. But I mean, I'm looking now and seeing all these lights, and I'm thinking, yeah, I think we probably are. And we're carrying a KY-38. All right. We have the most secure tactical radio that there is, the kind that you have to set that gun with about 20 manual settings on it to punch in the crypto code. You have to have all the frequencies. You have to have all the settings. And then the guy monitoring the radio says, "Sir, you need to hear this." And I'm thinking, now what? These guys are coming from everywhere, and he's got something else he wants me to listen to. And I pick up the handset, and I'm thinking, what do I hear? It's music. I'm hearing music coming over the handset. And then I hear this female NVA, whatever, start talking. And it dawns on me all of a sudden, this is funeral music. This is the obituary music. This is what I used to hear when I was little on my grandmother's radio every day, at lunch. They'd do the news, but then they would do the obituaries for the people, in that county or whatever that had died. And they'd read off your name and all this stuff, and they'd have this music in the background. And this female is reading off our obituary, that we were killed in action that day, and she reads my name off as Dick Thompson. And I'm thinking, there's only one person on this side of the world who knows me as Dick, that has any clue that that's my name. And that was Bardwell. And I knew, Bardwell was someplace. Nobody had him. And she reads my name off as Dick Thompson, reads off the name of every member that we had on the team. All of us is being killed in action that day on the secure, encrypted radio. Saigon's listening to this and thinking, what is going on? And I'm thinking, what is going on? This is making me, a little nervous. How did she know my name? How did they get on this frequency? And, and then that goes away. So it's kind of got my attention now. Mm-hmm. The bad guys are coming. So you start, talking back and forth, with, they've got a cubby out in the area now. So we start talking about, what are options for getting us out of here, because the weather's not that good. There's tons of North Vietnamese all around us. I've got this one woman who has just told us all that we were killed today. I read our obituary. How did she get our names? So everyone is in shock and confused about, what's going on. How did they know exactly where we were, and they're coming at us? The weather's starting to roll in, and the clouds are slowly starting to come down on the mountains. So now I'm thinking, we're not going to be able to get air support. They can't get aircraft in to extract us. And I'm having this conversation now with Covey about I need some options, because these guys are going to be here pretty soon, and it's not going to be pleasant. I mean, we're loaded for bear, but not for that many people, not to be trapped in between them. So finally they said, one option might be combat sky spots. So that's F4s coming out with 500-pound bombs, and you give them a coordinate 2,000 or 3,000 meters away from you. They're flying by radar and being vectored by radar toward those coordinates. And then when the radar says you're at the right place to release the bomb, you release, a bomb, and you see where it hits.
So this is because it's a nighttime scenario.
It's night. Well, it's night, plus now the clouds are down on the mountain. So he can't even see the mountain that we're on, or the ridgeline. So
Okay.
I mean,
and what was that? What was that technique called?
Combat sky spot.
Combat sky spot.
So
Okay.
it's a technique that's not used very often because it's not very accurate.
Right.
And only because this was an emergency situation did they even approve it. And they said you need to give us a set of coordinates that's 2,000 or 3,000 meters away to start with. Let him put one bomb out there and let's see where it hits, and then we'll start to adjust. So I said, if that's all we got, let's do it. So it didn't take long till there's an F4 out in the area, and I actually, using my emergency radio, I was able to talk, directly to the F4, which you can't normally do. Mm-hmm. And he told me that bombs away. It's going to be impact in about 20 seconds. You guys get your head down. I'm not sure what it's going to hit. I'm thinking that's nice to know. So it goes off, and it's a lot closer than 3,000 meters. So I'm thinking I'm really glad I pushed it on out there a ways. And it really wasn't on line with the ridge anyway. It kind of went over the ridge and down into the valley. But at least I knew approximately where it hit, so I could start to adjust him some now. So we started messing with that. That irritated the North Vietnamese. They were not happy that somebody was out there trying to drop a bomb on them. So we overheard radio transmissions saying, shoot them in the legs, take all the Americans prisoner. And we got a message coming up from Saigon. They were intercepting North Vietnamese transmissions and saying, they plan to capture you. And they're going to try to wound you and take you. So, okay, then we got to get these sky spots working for us here, get them in closer. And the bad guys are getting closer and closer. And so I start working them down. And, I'm kind of behind a tree, and one of the bombs goes off, and a piece of shrapnel, 2.5 inches or so in diameter, comes out across the top of my head, goes into the tree right in front of me, and just cuts, a line across the top of my head as it's going into the tree. And I'm thinking, that was close. I mean, that was pretty close. So, I was behind the tree for a little while. Once it cooled down a little bit, I popped it out and I put it in my pocket. I still have it at home somewhere. I wanted to bring it just to show it to you. But, so that creased the top of my head. It got my attention now. They're serious about doing something. Eventually, we do some gun battles and stuff, and that's going on.
Is it light yet?
No, but it's getting close. When it finally did get light, there was a Marine squadron that came out, a helicopter squadron that came out, and with gunships. And I guess the leader came over close to where the ridge line was and received so much ground fire and stuff from it. He told the rest of his guys, back off, we're not going in there. There's too much ground fire. And then all of a sudden I get a call from one of the gunship pilots, and he says, "Hey, I'm coming." And I said, "No, you don't come in here. If you try to fly up that ridge, you're going to have to go so low. You're going to have to fly right on the treetops and barely moving. You're going to have to almost be hovering. They're going to knock you down. Don't come in here. We'll find a way. Don't come up here." He said, "I'm coming." So.
This was a helo?
Yeah.
A helicopter gunship? Marine Corps helicopter gunship?
So it wasn't but a few minutes. I could hear him coming, and it wasn't but a few minutes, and then I heard him, I forgot his name now, Eagle Claw, something, Mayday, 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 we're hit. And, we're going down. And, so I talked to him a little more, and then he sent out another Mayday and said, we're on fire, going down. I'm going to try to make it to the river. So I think, this is not good. So, and he made it to the river, and it was kind of a deep, swift flowing river. Went in sideways. The pilot got out. The door gunner on that side got out, and the two of them got out. The crew chief on the side that went in first, and the co-pilot didn't get out. And the door gunner that got out was a good swimmer and stuff. So he jumped in the water and swam over there and went down, to try to get him. The other gunner got out, but the pilot couldn't get out and never saw the door gunner again. He never came back up. So they lost those two guys. Too many bad guys in that area. They couldn't go in to try to, extract the two guys that didn't come up. But they did get the pilot and his door gunner out. And so that wasn't a good scene. So
how far away was that from you, from your location?
Their impact with the river was probably 3,000 meters.
Okay. So this is all in the vicinity of you.
Yeah, it's all right around me. So they go in, and then, we have a battle, and it's not looking good. There's just too many of them, and we have no place to go. So it eventually gets to the point where I'm talking back to Covey, talking to the L4s, and I asked him, "Do you have any cluster bomb units? Got any CBU on board?" And he said they did. I said, "Put it on my position." And, I don't know if you've seen cluster bomb units, but it's a big container, and it's full of small bomblets that are about the size of a grapefruit or a little bigger. So it drops out about, the canister comes open, and, it just rains about 200 of those things down on you. So I just tell him.
So how close? So the enemy was all around you at
they're
this
right
point?
there. I'm already at the point.
For you to be calling
I'm looking around
onto your position, that means you're about to be overrun.
Yeah, I'm looking around and saying, "Oh man, is this the last thing I'm going to see?"
What time of day is it now?
It's mid-morning.
So
probably.
it's mid-morning. So you guys had been in heavy contact the entire morning.
Yeah.
The enemy's closing in on your position. They're making progress, obviously, because now you're getting to a point where
because we can't go up or down. And the sides of the ridge are very steep, so we can't go down the ridge on the sides. And they're coming in, and I'm thinking, how long will I be able to keep pulling the trigger? Once I start getting hit.
Did you guys already blow your claymores? Your perimeter claymores?
Yeah. Claymores are gone. They're coming, and I'm thinking.
And you had 20 guys in this element about?
Yeah. So the perimeter we're in, it's bigger than this, a little bigger than this room.
So we're talking like 15 by 15 feet.
Yeah, it's a fairly small perimeter.
And you guys are surrounded by?
And, in the thousands.
In the thousands of hardened NVA regulars.
Yeah, and they're coming. And, I tell the pilot, make your first run, put it on us. If you don't hear me come back on the radio, then make your next pass and just level everything on this ridge. because that means we're not here. So he told us, heads down, it's coming in, and it rains all these things down, and we had 7 of them land either inside the perimeter or right on the edge of the perimeter. None of them went off. None of them exploded, but they were exploding all around us. And you could hear the screams and all this stuff, because some of them were going off in the trees. Shrapnel was going everywhere, and it broke their attack. So I told him, hey, don't put another one on us. That's working. You can back off a little bit now. So
that's just divine intervention.
Yeah.
For there to be 7 of those cluster bombs that land inside your perimeter and none of them go off.
That just doesn't happen.
That's the only
You might
way.
have 1 or 2 of them not go off somewhere, but not all the ones that are right there.
And all the other ones do go off.
And the others do go off. I don't know that there were some out there that didn't, but it appears that they all went off. So they backed off. Things calmed down a little bit. So I had Bruce send some of his people to look for a way down the ridge. Could we go down somehow? So a team went out, and I got a call back saying, we just found the remains of another SOG team down on the side of the ridge here. And there's one body here, indigenous body. What do you want me to do? And I said, well, we need to identify who the person is. So without going into detail, I just told him to take the appropriate action so he could be identified and bring that back with him to the team. So and then we finally get some gunships working now, because the weather's starting to lift up. We've been bombing quite a bit during the night, so we start working down toward the LZ that we can't come in on. So we're going to try to get an extraction there. Ran into a small ambush, but that didn't last long. So we were able to keep going. Got down to the LZ, and we're looking around, looking for bad guys. But what I see is a tail fin sticking up out of the ground, a couple of feet. It's a 500-pound bomb sticking in the LZ, unexploded. So now we're thinking, are we going to bring a helicopter in here with that bomb sitting there, unexploded? So, excuse me. So we told Covey, this is what's going on. We'd really like to get out of here because they're coming back. So we have some dialogue, and they decided, okay, we're going to do the extraction because it's going to take 5 aircraft to get us out. So we started rotating them in, and my team was going to be the last team out. So we got the machine guns placing fire, out trying to suppress the fire. The gunships are suppressing fire, and rotating those ships in. And we had so many gunships and A1Es, on standby out there and just waiting on their turn to come in. It was unreal. But eventually, I think it was around 1,700, we got out. So started at 2,100 the day before, and 1,700 we finally got extracted and headed back. But we didn't, get to go after the prisoners. So then the questions start. How could they know who was on the team? How could they have the frequencies? They had to have a KY-38. Where did they get that? So it was, to my knowledge, those questions were never answered. If they were answered, we never found out how they managed to do that. There was about a 2-week delay between the time that we did the bright light mission for Dennis's team and us coming back.
Right.
So, the mission had already been planned, and that had taken a couple of weeks, and then we get delayed a couple of weeks. So there was a leak somewhere, had to be a leak in our compound. So the information got out. And I think when you were talking to Tilt, he was saying, in late 69 and going into 70, whole teams are just disappearing. I mean, information was getting out somehow. I mean, they were getting smarter, but information was getting out, and we were losing teams. So that was a little unique because you didn't normally get your obituary. I mean, and
No.
And there was one
No,
point.
you don't normally get that.
One point there, we found out after we got back, we found out there was a point during the mission there where they had actually listed us as MIA because all the radio traffic they were picking up from the North Vietnamese, so they had us that we really wasn't there now, and all this bombing and stuff that was going on, we wasn't there. So,
And did anyone get wounded during that?
yeah, shrapnel and
Shrapnel.
stuff. No one was killed, but we shrapnel. I got the top of my head cut. So
And you got that qualification of calling a cluster bomb in on your position, which is a pretty rare one to walk away from.
yeah, and so I guess today, in this day, when I hear people saying, let's ban cluster bombs, we don't want to use cluster bombs, I'm thinking, man, I'm glad that thing was around at least one time.
Yeah, that's sort of that's like the, I don't know, we say the ultimate horrible situation. It doesn't get any worse than when you are calling for airstrikes on your position. That's the last thing you do, right?
Yep.
That's when you say, we're going to be overrun. We're probably going to die. This is our last ditch effort. This is the ultimate of all Hail Marys. This is it. Call for fire on our position.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. And by the grace of God, those Browns that hit inside your perimeter.
That's the only way you can explain it, I'm telling you. Oh, and I'll give you one other. So I'm trying to get the last helicopter loaded and get my guys on it. And this one's going to sound strange too, but I'm standing right next to the helicopter. I'm putting people on, and I hear a voice that says, drop. A loud voice that says, drop. Without hesitation, I just collapsed to my knees, and as I did, about a 10-round burst of machine gun rounds hit the side of the chopper right where my head was. I mean, a fraction of a second later, I would have been decapitated. I mean, there were things like that happening, throughout, and you think, where did this come from? Why? How's all this happening?
It's beyond coincidence.
Yeah, it is. And, it was definitely an interesting mission. I just, very upset that, we didn't get to go after the POWs, but...
Yeah.
What's a prairie fire? What is it called? Prairie fire?
Prairie fire. So the area of operations is, they would call it prairie. And then the prairie fire emergency was when there was a bad situation where these guys needed to get extracted.
Gotcha.
That's the prairie fire emergency.
They couldn't afford for us to be captured or discovered. So whatever it took to make sure that we were not. And if you read the SOG material, you'll hear about that, sometimes a team, it's rumored at least, that sometimes a B-52 strike was put on teams that disappeared to make sure there were no survivors. I've done bomb assessment damages after B-52 strikes. I've never had one put on me, and this would have been a good time for them to put one out there if they were going to do that. But I don't know that that's true. But that you had volunteered to go on a mission where you can't, under any circumstances, be taken alive. So
You have another mission highlighted where it just says prisoner snatch, .22 caliber pistol with a silencer. Did you ever get your prisoner?
I never got one alive.
At what point did your nickname or your code name turn to Terminator? Because I'm thinking it might have had something to do with this.
Yeah, it was actually after SOG on some other things I was doing. But
okay.
It was, I had commanders, starting with Dick Meadows that, started this thing about, you're the most relentless person I've ever seen. You're the last person in the world I want to have coming after me because you just won't stop. And when I had other commanders, after that saying the same thing, and after Terminator movie came out. And
they named that movie after you.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah. But then the name all of a sudden was prominent, and so. They said your name's really Terminator. So I've kind of hung on to that one. I use it as a race name when I do Ironman competitions and stuff.
I had a good conversation when I was talking to Till, and he went through a lot of the scenarios that he described. He was talking about the dogs that would be coming after him.
Oh yeah.
And I asked Till, I said, do you like dogs? He says, I hate dogs. I mean, he said it without a moment of hesitation. I said, what do you think of dogs now? He said, I hate dogs. And of course, he also said his wife likes dogs, and therefore they have dogs. Yeah. But are you scarred from dogs as well?
No. Even though I do have a robotic dog, I've had a lot of dogs, across the years. But you can deal with dogs. Mm-hmm. I mean, they tend to give you position away sometimes, but the .22 pistol with a silencer is still going to make some noise. Mm-hmm. But if the dog gets far enough away from the group, you can take him out. With one of those, you can put out CS powder, on the trail, and that really screws their smell up when they sniff that. So there are ways to deal with dogs, but it scares you a little bit when you realize they're coming after you with dogs. I prefer trackers because I know how to get them. I don't miss trackers. They will step on one of my mines. So the hardest trackers to get rid of are when they put 3 of them out there at different locations with a couple of pieces of bamboo, and they'll clack the bamboo over here. And you'll hear that, and you say, whoa, we're not going that way. So we start to turn this way, and if you go too far, you'll hear clacking over on this side.
Oh, so they're actually channelizing you.
They're channeling you right into an ambush. You know that's going to happen. So it's hard to put out toe poppers or something for those guys because they're so far away from you, and you don't know where they're going to walk. You can't get to them. So, that makes it more interesting how you're going to get away because they're herding you right toward that ambush.
What was the deal with the note you have in here about the .22, the hush puppy .22 with the silencer and the prisoner snatch? Was that just another failed prisoner snatch?
Well, it was another technique. Yeah, I had trouble keeping them alive, but with the .22, I used a similar scenario as the ambush we were talking about, where I shot the .22. I would shoot the guy in the thigh. And it would sting enough, it would cause them to drop their hands from their weapon, and then Thumper, would take him down. Mm-hmm. I'd hit the morphine in him, and that was the plan. I hit the femoral artery one time with the .22 of all the whole leg there, and I hit the cerebral artery. So the guy bled to death. Just little accidents like that got in the way. But and I didn't have, but one of the other teams they had one, and he was alive. They were coming out on strings, and one of the little guys was holding the guy, and even though he'd been drugged up a little, he was just holding him. And they were at about 3,000 feet, and this guy started coming to and decided he was not going to be a prisoner. So he started kicking and squirming and biting the guy in the face, and the little guy said, "Okay,
I guess you want that option. Option 2, 3,000 feet."
He just turned him loose and watched him disappear into the canopy. So that was somebody else's bad luck on it. That wasn't mine. But yeah.
And at this point, you got to be close to your 1-year run over there, and are you starting to feel any of the short time mentality? Are you starting to think, oh, this is the last mission, when's the last one? Are you starting to feel that at all?
I started to feel not so much the last mission, but I started to feel like I mean, they hit this compound from time to time. So I'd been over there, a year. So I go to the supply room and I say, I'd like to sign out a flak jacket and a steel pot. And they're saying, what? I said, next time the siren goes off and we head for the bunkers, I'm going to have on a flak jacket and steel pot.
There you go.
So I don't have long left, and I don't want to, somebody's lucky shot to take me out.
What was that, like last month you were there?
Yeah, the last few weeks.
You're thinking, I've made it this far.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get hit by a piece of frag in the compound. Because
you would see people. I had another friend of mine that had been for a long time before SOG. He only had a couple of weeks left before he was going home. And they had a mission come up, and he volunteered to go on it. And I said, Pete, what are you doing? You got 2 weeks, man. He said, they need a platoon leader to go out with this company. So I'm going to do it, and then I'm out of here. That was his last mission. So you see people like that. So I tried not to think of anything as this is my last one. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm going to do this week or whatever. It's not my last one. Mm-hmm. But I did think about, when I'm running to that bunker, maybe a steel pot and a flak jacket would be okay. It's night. It's relatively cool. So I'll be all right.
So how did the deployment end?
So I finished up and left there, went back down to Natrang, to process out. They told me, no, you're going to be stuck here for a couple of weeks or so before we can get you on a plane home. So I went over to the SF headquarters and I said, I need help. So there was an NCO there, said, what can I do for you? I said, I need to get on a plane tonight. And he said, let me see what I can do. Mm-hmm. So I go out and party with some other guys that I know, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody's knocking on my door, and this guy's there saying, I need you to get over, I forgot what they call the place you had to go through, but you need to get over there right away so they can process you through and get you on the plane.
So are you a captain now at this point?
No,
or are you still a
first lieutenant?
You're still a first lieutenant. So
at
this point, are you thinking you're staying in the Army?
I'm thinking I may stick around for a while. I mean, could you... I had thought it was going to be 3 years, but when you get into an organization that has the latest, greatest gadgets and missions and esprit de corps, I mean, you can't just walk away from that. I mean, that's hard to do.
Where are you going to walk to?
Yeah.
It's all downhill from there.
There's nothing else. It's like the guys that come back from walking on the moon. Now what are you going to do? Yeah. So, I mean, we had everything from the little tiny grenades, much bigger than a jawbreaker that they gave us to test. I had a rocket pistol. This was like a little tin.
Expand.
It was like a little tin gun that you probably played with when you were a kid. That you stick a cork in the end of it and you squeeze the little trigger and it pops the cork out on a little string. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this thing popped out a 50 caliber round with a rocket in the back of it, and and they gave us this, and I thought, well, this is cool. It doesn't make much noise. It sounds like shooting a bottle rocket, just a whoosh. And this thing's as big as your thumb, and it's solid steel. I mean, on the outside, steel casing.
What was it? What did they build it for? What was the purpose of it?
To be something really quiet that had a tremendous penetrating power.
So like you would take a vehicle out with it or something?
Not a vehicle, but it'd go right through a vest. I mean,
got it.
Unless I was right here. If I shot you with it right here, it'd bounce off of you.
Because it wouldn't have.
It takes about 10 or 15 feet to build up the speed. But beyond that, I mean, I shot it through 2x4s. I mean, you just couldn't stop it. But again, I tried to use it, and I figured I'll take this guy out because it's going to be really quiet. And so I get it up, and, it's night, and I go click, and you can hear the click. No rocket, So one of the other guys had to take him out because this thing didn't work. So they got rid of those because they had, such a malfunction rate with them. I mean, go Google it. Google
rocket pistol.
Rocket pistol. I mean, there are videos out there of people shooting them and trying to make them work. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
So you're around your is this around your 3-year mark? You must be around the 3, or had you already reenlisted, or was reenlistment coming up?
Well, because I went to OCS, then I incurred extra time.
Okay.
So I had to stick around. And if I was going to accept captain, I had to go indefinite. So
the weird thing is you're in Vietnam, you're in SOG, you're conducting these crazy operations. You barely lived through this, and then you all of a sudden 2:00 in the morning, you're still drunk probably. And somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hey, you're going home."
Yeah. So then I get on. I go down to get on the plane, and you're going through a little security thing, and the guy says, "What's that in your pants?"
Yeah.
And I said, "You mean this?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "It's a war trophy." And he says, "Okay." I put it back down in my pants, and I got on that civilian aircraft, and off I go. I'm thinking nobody's going to hijack this thing.
Yeah, no, that's for
that
sure.
ain't going to happen. Got off the plane with it in San Francisco, or I think it was San Francisco, or L.A., one of the two, and went right on through there. Of course, you didn't have the security checks and things like you have now. But
so now you're in either San Francisco, you're somewhere in California, you're 48 hours or 72 hours or something, less than a few days out of the bush.
Yeah.
How's that transition?
It's tough. I mean, it's a different world back here. Aside from the protest and all that, it's just a totally different environment, different world. I've come from the Wild West. I've come from a world where I didn't have all these rules of engagement that you have now. The rule of engagement was, if I see you, I kill you. If I run across somebody out in the area of operations, I terminate them. That's it. You're a bad guy. You don't have to have a weapon. You don't have to be doing anything, aggressive toward me. I just have to see you, because you're not supposed to see me. So if I let you see me, then I basically signed your death warrant. And now I'm in a world where there are rules, there are laws, there are all kinds of things. You can't do that.
And what did the Army, I guess this is a loaded, what did the Army do to help you reintegrate to being back in America?
At that point, the reintegration was, here's your next assignment. You're going to be a ranger instructor in the ranger department.
Okay.
And I'm saying, okay, I can do that. I wanted to be a ranger instructor, so I got that particular job, and I thought, I've got maybe 8 months at the most before I'm going to be back. So what better place to put me than as a ranger instructor, going out and evaluating ranger students on small patrols, tactics, all that kind of stuff, and having a journal saying, here's how I can prove this technique that I used in SOG. Here's how I can practice slipping up on people more. I can improve all the techniques that I've been using there. I can go improve them. I can spend more time, at a range, at a range shooting, improve my marksmanship skills, my listening skills, my night movement skills. I can go out and work on this stuff for 8 months, journal it, and when I get back to SOG, I'm going to be a better SOG guy than I was when I was there before.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've been going for another 2 hours and 40 minutes. We're going to pick up with your ranger instructor period of your life on the next podcast.
Okay, good.
Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And yeah, I think that's not just thanks for coming on, it's thanks for everything. We'll talk to you on the next podcast.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Echo.
Well, once again, Colonel Henry Dick Thompson has left the building and has once again left me in a complete sense of awe, because we're talking about just absolute insanity. And the fact that the men of SOG did what the men of SOG did, and the fact that we get to sit here and talk to some of them is just unbelievable. Because who survives what he did? Who survives what Tilt did? Who survives what the Frenchman did? Not many. And that's something that we need to remember. As awesome as it is to sit here and hear these stories, remember that they're not just stories. That these were people's lives and these were people's deaths. And so many of these men did not return. And they gave their lives so that we can live ours. And here we are, forever indebted to them, to their sacrifice. And while I know that we cannot ever repay them, we can't. It's impossible. But what we do know is that the best we can do to attempt to repay them is to live our lives every day in a way that venerates their sacrifices. So don't just live. Don't just be. Instead, be everything that you are capable of being. That's what we need to do. So, Echo, I guess that being everything we are capable of being starts out with us just being capable.
Yes, sir.
You like that word, capable.
Yes.
Well, you went through a whole
Capable thing.
a whole kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you kind of like.
You latched onto something that I said.
Yes.
But then you kind of adjusted it so it made sense to you.
Yeah.
In a clear way.
Yeah, and I would say even more accurately put, like where I latched onto it, exactly, good way of putting it. I latched onto it and then just sort of like, you know how you go down that wormhole more and more and more and more. So it's always on you. Ran with it. And playing the long game versus the short game. That's another, and those are the two for sure, because that's really what it kind of is. It's almost like every decision you make, most decisions that you make are going to land on like one of those things. Like, okay. And a lot of times both of them. So you're like, okay, am I going to play the long game here or the short game? And that's everything pretty much. Yeah. And then the other one, do I want to be capable or comfortable? Right. That's the other two. Like, okay. And if you can kind of keep that in your mind, your decision making will be a lot better for yourself, you know. It's
interesting though, this little play on words a little bit. That's a little bit of a play on words I just said, right? Sure. If you want to be everything you're capable of being, well, it starts with just being capable in the first place.
Yes.
Where do we need to be capable? And how can we improve our capabilities?
Yes. Physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Spiritually?
And spiritually, I think yes. Because some people will tell you, no, not spiritually.
Really?
Well, then again, depends on what you mean.
Let me tell you, jiu-jitsu will definitely help you in all aspects. Let's think about this pragmatically. Confidence.
Yes.
If you know jiu-jitsu, you will be more confident. Now you'll start off by taking a little bit step back in confidence, because when you very first start training, you're going to be overwhelmed by the fact that you're going to be scared of everyone looking at him going, wait, this guy might know jiu-jitsu and then they can beat me. But then after a little while you go, oh, okay, no, cool. Even if this person knows jiu-jitsu, I at least know what to do a little bit.
Yes, exactly.
So So confidence is definitely going to help you. Stress relief, we talked about that last time. It's definitely going to help you.
Big time.
Capability is definitely going to help you. Yeah, so it's going to help you across the board. Social aspect's going to help you. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Back to Dr. Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, all the SOG guys were, well, actually a lot of guys that we've talked to or whatever, I kind of trip out like when I go home in a lot of ways, but in this particular way where, you know how like in the movies, right, where you got the guy and he's almost about to get killed.
Yeah.
Right? But in the back of your mind, you're like, unless this movie's going to kill this character, which they're not if it's the main character.
Right.
Unless it's way at the end, and that's a different story. But, you know, it's in the middle of the movie or whatever, and he's about to get found out by the bad guys. Can he get found and killed or whatever? You're like, okay, this is good, the way they present it and everything, and it's suspenseful. But the back of my mind, like, they're not going to kill this guy, you know? So you kind of get that feeling when they're telling this story, but it's like a real story.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, when I was thinking about this, like, it's cool. It's so awesome to sit here and talk to these guys that lived.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that there's countless guys that the exact scenario that these guys went through,
right,
where, the bullet went 2 inches to the left instead of 2 inches to the right, and that guy is dead. Wow. The helicopter got hit with this, the helicopter crashed. Like, it's that's why it's such a miracle that these guys are sitting here talking to us.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Then that's why I'm actually tripping out, because sure, we know the guy lived because he's sitting right here. We know that part of it, but when he takes you back to the moment, bro, we really don't know if this guy's gonna live or not.
Yeah,
I mean, as far as himself,
100%.
you know. And then I trip out even more. I kind of go down a little wormhole. Like, man, this is just how impossible this is. Not impossible, maybe that's not the right word, but it kind of feels like the right word. But just how weird this is, where let's say you went back in time and visited, you know, Tilt or whoever and said, hey, this is what you're going to do. And these very specific things are going to happen. And you're going to live. Even himself would be like, I don't know if that's possible, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Meanwhile, it's factually happened.
Yeah.
Man. It kind of puts a lot of things into perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Those guys are just unbelievable. And that story from Dick Thompson that I read today, just going into rescue with no plan, with no somebody else's weapon. It's just like completely just dropping 15 feet into 150 foot of jungle canopy, falling through the trees until you luckily hit a branch. So you don't, by the way, if you hit the ground without hitting anything, you just die.
Straight up, just die.
Yeah. And so, yeah, these guys are they're just awesome. They're just awesome human beings.
Yep. Yeah. And then you sort of see him sitting across from you and you're like, and just there he is.
Yeah.
This is the guy who did that for real stuff, you know?
Yeah. Man, what about those old pictures of Tilt when Tilt's like 22 years old? You just look at those and go, that's like the coolest guy ever. Yeah. And you see pictures of all these guys. The Frenchman with his legs all taped up. And you see Dick Thompson. Dick Thompson was like, what was he, a first lieutenant? I thought it was cool on the first podcast when I was asking him about how, like, when you volunteered, was there any resistance? He's like, no. He's volunteering to be an officer in Vietnam. The life expectancy was a couple weeks. They're like, oh, you want to be an officer? Cool. Step right over here into this line. Oh, you want to go to Ranger School? Cool. Step into this line. Oh, you want to be Special Forces? Cool. Step into this line. Oh, you want to go to SOG? Cool. No problem. Step over here. There was zero resistance. Zero resistance for him to go and do what he wanted to do, because the life expectancy of every one of those, it's just like volunteer to volunteer to volunteer to be dead.
Yeah.
And there's no resistance.
It's cool.
So.
Man, it's crazy, man. Well, very capable people we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. 100%. The last, back to jiu-jitsu, yes, covers all those things, and we should be doing this, in my opinion. So, we need gis when we do jiu-jitsu, because that's part of the uniform. We get an origin gi. Don't even have to ask that question anymore.
No longer a question.
No longer a question. Origin Gi, go to originmain.com. Boom, pick whatever gi you want. Easy money. Also, they also have rash guards on there. Other clothing items.
Yeah, because you want to represent,
Sure.
being in an American-made clothing, but you can't wear your gi to the store, unfortunately.
Yes,
I mean, you could technically.
It's not recommended, yeah.
You could technically, but usually the cutoff for that is around 11 years old.
Yes, sir. That's what I was going to say.
Like my little 10-year-old daughter, she's walking around in a gi, no factor.
No factor. No one's going to say nothing.
Yeah, no one says anything to her. She's not like walking around trying to prove that she's a jiu-jitsu player.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of evident that she's a jiu-jitsu player because she is wearing a gi. But, it's no factor. She'll go to dinner with a gi on. You know what I mean?
Well, okay. All right. I guess it depends. Circumstantially,
Well, she's 10 years old.
Possible.
I think her cutoff is 11.
Yes.
When she turns 11, she'll probably be like, I'm going to take off my gi right now.
Yeah, well, if you come straight from jiu-jitsu and you're like, hey, let's pick up some dinner and you're hanging out.
She's not going, hey, we're going out for dinner from the house. Let me put my gi on.
Yeah, okay.
No, she's not doing that. I wouldn't be bothered if she did. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Well, my son wore a dang Superman uniform for like 2 straight years when he was, 5 years old, 5 and 6, just wearing a dang Captain America outfit, just walking around. He just go to school with that. It had the muscles in it. You know what I mean?
Oh, dang,
He's just
the
walking
actual
around.
costume.
Yeah, like a straight costume. He's just walking around,
right.
whatever.
Cool, man. I dig it.
And my other daughter wore a dang tutu. You know what that is? It's like a ballerina outfit, ballerina uniform. When she wore that thing all the time.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yeah.
She's just no factor. So what I'm saying is,
a little bit different, but
when you get past age 10, maybe 11, you don't want to wear your gi to the store, to the restaurant.
Yeah.
But you still, in your heart, you want to represent.
Yeah.
You're good because we got Origin jeans.
Yes, sir.
You got the Origin jeans. You can get the regular weight jeans, or you can get the Delta 68 jeans, which are, I guess they're the Jocko signature model.
Yeah, maybe, but if they're thinner, right?
They're thinner,
Well, technically, isn't that a fashion thing? I'm not saying this particular thing is the fashion thing. I'm saying being thinner. Fashion jeans tend to be thinner.
Okay, well, I don't know about that. What I do know is this. I live in California. Mm-hmm. It's warmer here. Mm-hmm. We don't always need to wear thicker jeans. Mm-hmm. So we get jeans that are lightweight, just like when you're in the military, which you weren't, so you wouldn't know anything about field camis, about how they used to have woodland camis. They had a lightweight and they had a heavyweight. You don't know about that. So I do.
Yes,
so guess what we have? Lightweight jeans. And I'll say the other ones are medium. The other jeans are just normal jeans.
Yeah.
The Delta 68, named after my forefathers in the SEAL teams that wore jeans in the Mekong Delta.
Is it 68 for the year?
Yeah.
That's a good name.
Yeah, I know. Delta 68.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So get the Delta 68 jeans if you need something that's a little bit lighter weight. Mm-hmm. Not for fashion. I guess if you're Echo Charles, you can do it for fashion. But if you're a normal human.
Fashion too. Hey, potentially. We'll just say, look, Pete sprinkled some fashion in there. You know that already.
Watch him.
Factually.
You got to watch him like a hawk.
Yes.
But there's no fashion on the Delta 68 jeans.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I'm positive.
All right, well, when I get
jeans.
my Delta 68 jeans, if that ever happens, I'm going to make an evaluation and I'll report back. But my hypothesis is that if Pete has anything to do with it, which incidentally he does, he sprinkled some fashion on there.
Believe me, I gotta watch that guy like a sniper. Because he will constantly try and throw some.
Here's the benefits. Here's the benefit.
I'm surprised they're not bell bottoms.
Okay, so you sure bringing them back. I dig it, and you're correct. You're not wrong. You're right. Mm-hmm. But you're like you eat steak, right? What do you put on your steak?
Steak.
Like, what do you put on there? You put salt and pepper on there, or what? Okay,
yeah.
okay. So pretty basic salt and pepper, right? So people, they'll put like a special seasoning. They got their special rub, right? Yeah. Are you with that, or are you just like whatever, or are you just like, hey, don't do that? Okay.
I'm not anti. I'm not hating them, but I'm not. It seems unnecessary to me.
Okay, so here's the comparison that what Pete does with fashion, what people could do with steak, potentially. Okay, let's say you're the kind of person who's like, salt and pepper, that's my jam. Don't touch my steak otherwise. Medium or whatever, however you like to cook. Salt and pepper, that's all. You put your stupid rub, your seasoning on it, you're messing up my whole steak.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? You know, people are like that.
Yeah.
And I dig it, man.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
you know, that's your thing. Pete is the kind of guy who will be like, hey, no problem, I got you. Salt and pepper, that's it. But he knows confidently that if he puts some of that special rub on there, you'll like it.
Yeah.
As far as you're concerned, you're like, nope, don't touch it.
Yeah.
And then he'll be like, okay, I got you.
He does.
He'll sneak it in there.
You're 100% accurate.
Yes.
He will do that.
Yeah.
And there's been times where I've been like, bro,
He put too much.
you put too much seasoning on
rub
there.
on that
Stop.
one.
Stop what you're doing.
But I think he sneaks it in
He
there,
does a good job,
and then
yes.
when you taste the steak, you're like, dang, Pete makes a great steak. Not even realize he snuck in the rub. in there. That's what he does with the fashion with you.
I hope he doesn't hear this, which I know he will.
He's gonna
because
use
now
it.
he's going to get excited about it and think he can sneak in more. You can't, Pete. I'm watching you like a sniper.
Yes,
I got eyes
100%.
on, bro.
Pete, good.
So the jeans.
I say, Pete, do what you do, bro. Do it. Just don't take it too far. Yeah, the jeans are good. I like, and this is how I know about the jeans too, because when I put them on, it's like, okay, my wife is kind of critical. She's from the Pacific Northwest, my wife. So she knows about just functional jeans for work and like all that stuff. She's just, but she's, you know, she's not
lumberjack blood.
Yeah, you know, she's done. She gets it. I'm speaking for her, by the way. But she doesn't like it. She doesn't like the look. It reminds her, you know, those are dad jeans, and you know, my dad's a worker or whatever. She doesn't like the look, is what I'm saying. So I put on the Origin jeans. If she didn't like them, she would tell me 100%. She probably wouldn't even let me be seen with her, which I can respect on a certain level. And she even said those jeans look good.
Interesting.
So, man, approved. In my household, approved.
Looks like Pete aligned the spice right for Echo's jeans.
Yep, perfect. Also, what else does Origin have? They have supplements, obviously. Keep us on track in the game, even when you get older. If you're old school and you ask, am I too old to join jiu-jitsu? Nope.
I was working with a tech company yesterday.
Sure.
And they were talking about age. And everyone there was young. And they were like saying, like, no, there's some older people here, like late 40s. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? It was pretty funny. But yes, here's the thing. One thing that can help you is these supplements, Joint Warfare Krill Oil, Discipline Go. They're definitely beneficial. If you think you might forget, first of all, take more discipline. But second of all, subscribe. You can do the subscription thing on originmain.com, and then you just get, it just shows up. Just make it a standard operating procedure. Done.
Yeah.
Then you don't fall off. You know how long I've gone without Joint Warfare for?
How long?
Never. I take it every
Straight
day.
up. Dang, that's good.
Yes.
Yes.
Same with krill oil.
You mentioned forgetting. So, you know how like when I forget to take it, like you kind of look at me crazy, like, bro, what?
Yeah.
Like, how do you forget? You just
Standard operating procedure.
it's not hard to
It's
forget.
buy the
or whatever.
toothpaste.
Or one might argue, oh, it's not important to you, right? But it's not really true, because if you're in a certain routine, and this goes to your point where if you don't roll that into your routine, you will forget, even if it's important, because there's certain times of the day or certain times, moments in life or whatever that you do. Like, bro, you know when you're driving, right? When you're driving home, bro, you'll forget the whole experience of driving home. Because you're thinking other stuff, like routinely or whatever, and you're like, oh, shoot, I don't remember one single moment of driving home, really.
And
you just did it automatically.
And yet you lived.
You lived, yes. What, living's not important? Well, no, driving home's not important. Yeah, it's very important, but it's just so routine. See what I'm saying? So, like I said, if taking the krill oil or joint warfare is not rolled into your routine, you can potentially forget it. So, roll it into your routine.
Mm-hmm. Subscribe. And you actually save money if you subscribe too. So do that. Don't forget about the ready-to-drink cans. You don't need to drink these hyped up energy drinks anymore that are literally not good for you. You can now drink something that is good for you.
Yeah.
Tastes delicious. Gives you a little
something.
You need that little hitter.
Yeah. It's a milder taste too than the energy drink scenario.
Oh, yeah.
So it kind of allows you, I mean, I'm assuming this is why it allows you to drink like more of them. Be careful with it, I'm saying, but you know the kind where you drink two of the, we'll say, for lack of a better term, traditional energy drinks. You drink two of those, you don't feel good afterwards.
No, you feel like crap.
Even if you're into energy drinks, typically. Yeah, you kind of feel junk. Those are just like, man, you can kind of have one going.
Yep.
Like kind of all day.
God, they're so good. So you can, and don't forget about milk. all different kinds of protein desserts. It's just straight desserts for you, for your Warrior Kid milk, for your kids. Get some of that. And then we got the white tea. Going to get you through the winter months with the warm white tea. You get the canned white tea. And, of course, the benefit is 8,000 pound deadlift. But we already know that.
Yep. Also, speaking of benefits, kind of, Jocko's store. It's called Jocko's store. That's where you can get shirts.
Why is that beneficial? Because it's speaking of benefits. Now,
representing.
I thought what you were going to say is there's a guy that said his wife said to him, "What do you want for your birthday?" Mm-hmm. And he said, "There's a store. It's called Jocko's store."
Oh, yeah.
And she was like, "Check."
Roger
At least in my mind,
yes.
She said, "Check."
Yeah.
She probably didn't. She probably said, "Okay, what's that?"
But yeah, let me go ahead and look into it, Google
anyways,
it or whatever.
Looked into it.
Yeah, good. And this is where, you can get shirts. It is beneficial because, especially nowadays, like you can get, I think nowadays, I don't want to say the word fashion necessarily, but I'm saying, but what you wear has, what you wear.
We're going to shut down the store.
What you wear, it's not a fashion store. It's not. But what you wear is like, you have many options, right? Like in life, I'm saying, you can wear just a blank shirt if you want, you know? So you kind of look for a little bit more than just I guess you kind of look for a lot of things. Anyway, one of the things that as far as this stuff that you can get, it kind of is representative of a certain, how should I say, not message, but a certain discourse.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyways, what you can get is t-shirts, rash guards, hats, sweatshirts, hoodies.
But not just any t-shirt, though, is what I'm saying.
Good quality ones.
Good quality.
Oh,
for sure, 100%. Yes, given. But, there's a little added layer to what you're wearing.
Is there a placebo effect when you wear a shirt that says discipline equals freedom?
Yes.
Does it affect your mentality?
Technically, yes, it is, I guess, technically a placebo effect, but that's how, right?
Or is it just a real effect?
It's a real effect. Well, placebo effect is a real effect.
Yeah, that's true.
You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like hypnosis or something like this.
Yeah.
Right? That's a real effect too, most of the time. Sometimes it's just a show, but the result is real. Yeah. Is what I'm saying.
That's where we get the 19% increased strength and performance.
With
and
the rash guard,
mental acuity.
Yes.
With the rash guard with the t-shirts.
Yeah. Actually, we're up to 22% now.
Okay.
Yeah, that happened last year, late last year. And up 22%, improved everything, mental, physical, and spiritual, and social, by the way.
Okay.
With all these items. Anyway, jockostore.com, shirts, t-shirts, rash guards, hoodies, hats, beanies.
I said all this stuff, bro.
Well, there's your reminder. Boom, jockostore.com. Also, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. If you want. There you go. Stitcher, iTunes, whatnot.
Also, if there's not enough of this podcast to listen to, which really means you have a long commute, you can also check out the Grounded podcast, which is a different podcast that we do. It's called Grounded.
Yes.
We talk about jiu-jitsu, life, experience, humor, and other things.
And here's a good element.
I like you to back me up on other things.
It's true. It's true because there are some elements of that I did notice that, you know how there's like issues, not necessarily controversial.
You're super hype on the Grounded podcast.
Yes, because
I think it's because you kind of like feel like you're a little bit of the star of the Grounded podcast.
No, I don't feel like I'm the star at all. Actually, I feel like that you will allow me, maybe not anymore, but you will allow me to introduce elements to it that kind of have two sides to it, and then you can kind of see, okay, where do people fall on this issue? Not important issues, by the way. But so yes, I am. Would you say hyped?
You're hyped. Yeah. You're
hyped. I guess.
You sit around and listen to the Grounded podcast and like rewind and replay your parts again.
No, bro. No. Anyway, how about this? Let's just say I highly recommend that one. How about that?
Good. Don't forget about the Warrior Kid podcast. We got some new episodes coming your way. We'll say in the near future. And don't forget to get some Warrior Kid soap. You can support an actual Warrior Kid out there running a business, young Aiden, making soap so that you can stay clean. IrishOatsRanch.com.
Yep. Also, YouTube, if you're interested in the video version of this podcast.
If you want to see what Dick Thompson looks like.
Well, yeah. Yes, or anyone on the podcast that we interview, or each other, if you don't know what Jocko looks like.
Yeah. And then we have psychological warfare, which is a little mental support, psychological support. If you find yourself in a moment of weakness, you can just press play on your phone.
Sure.
And you'll get to listen to a little guidance from me. That's available on Google Play, iTunes, MP3 platforms of all kinds. If you need a visual reminder to stay on the path, check out flipsidecanvas.com from my brother Dakota Meyer. Podcast 115, by the way. He makes these things here in America. You go to flipsidecanvas.com to get one. Books, got some books. First of all, Stress Effect. Again, we haven't hit it yet, but the next podcast with Colonel Dick Thompson, we will be covering the Stress Effect. So you can get that book. It's on the website. It's also on Amazon, but you can click through our website, jockopodcast.com, and then you can get the book, The Stress Effect. And then there's Leadership Strategy and Tactics. This is my new book I have coming out, which is actually very granular. Here's a little section from it, part 2. This is just from the contents, part 2. Leadership Tactics. 1, becoming a leader. How to succeed as a new leader. How to be chosen to lead. When you're not chosen. Imposter syndrome. Insecurity as a leader. Transitioning from follower or peer to leader. Overcoming a grudge. New sheriff in town. Don't go overboard, Rambo. So there's some topics that are in the new Leadership Strategy and Tactics book. If you want to get a copy of it, try and get a first edition. You need to order it right now, because otherwise, when it comes out January 14th, Amazon's going to send you a note that says, you go, oh, cool, Jocko's book came out today. I'm going to order it. You'll go on there. It'll say, it's shipping in 3 to 8 weeks. And you're going to go, what is wrong with the logistics train? Jocko's horrible. And I'll say, yeah, I know. I didn't do a good job of convincing you when you needed to order the book. So I failed. So let me not fail by getting on there and helping me to help you. And then, of course, we got the Warrior Kid books, 1, 2, and 3. These are books that I wish I had when I was a kid. And if I promise you, when you read it, you say, I wish I would have had this book when I was a kid. You might even be in a full-on adult and say, I wish I learned these lessons. Way of the Warrior Kid 1, Way of the Warrior Kid 2, Mark's Mission, and Way of the Warrior Kid 3, Where There's a Will. So check those out. If you've got a little kid in your life somewhere, a little bit younger, maybe 6 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, 3 years old, get them Mikey and the Dragons. They're actually going to learn a pragmatic technique to overcome fear, which, if you remember being a little kid, life is filled with fear. So how do you overcome that? You get Mikey and the Dragons. That's what you do. Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. There's the Christmas present. There's the Christmas present you want to get for someone that maybe drifted off the path. Maybe they're having a hard time. Maybe life isn't going good. Maybe they could do better. Maybe you know that discipline would help them in their life. Get them the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. Simple as that. And then for leadership, we got Extreme Ownership and we got Dichotomy of Leadership. I wrote those with my brother Leif Babbitt. It's about what we learned on the battlefield and how you can apply it to your life to win, to your business to win, to your company to win. I also have a leadership consultancy. It's called Echelon Front. And what we do is we solve problems through leadership. That is what we do. So go to echelonfront.com for details. If you want to have someone from the team come and speak at your company, don't go to a speakers bureau. No, you go to echelonfront.com. You cut out the middleman and you go right to the company. That's what we do. You don't need to Google Jocko speaker because you're going to get some. You'll see Echelon Front. You won't know what it is maybe, and you go click on someone else. And then they charge you a big chunk of money on top of what I'm going to charge you. Don't do that. Go to echelonfront.com. We also have online training, because leadership training is not an inoculation. You don't get one shot and now you're good to go. No, it takes time. It takes reps. Get the reps in. See it again. Seeing it from a different angle. efonline.com. And then we got muster dates coming for 2020. Go to extremeownership.com. This is our leadership seminar, our leadership conference. Come and check that out. And of course, EF Overwatch and EF Legion. These are our placement platforms where we are taking military personnel and putting them into civilian organizations so that they can help those organizations lead at every level and win. Go to efoverwatch.com or eflegion.com. That is what you need, is leadership. And if you need more of us, or you have questions for us, or you have answers for us, you can find all of us on the interwebs. Dick Thompson is on Twitter at HPS_CEO and at HPSYS.com. High Performance Systems. That's his company. And of course, we are also on Twitter, Instagram, and Diet Phrasenbox. Echo is at Echo Charles, and I am at Jocko Willink. And once again, sincere thanks and appreciation to Dick Thompson for coming on this program and sharing his lessons with us. And of course, we thank him for his incredible service and sacrifice to our great nation. And that goes to all the rest of our servicemen and women who stand the watch against evil and against tyranny so that we can be here living in freedom. And to our police and law enforcement and firefighters and paramedics and EMTs and dispatchers and correctional officers and Border Patrol and Secret Service and all the first responders. All you that are out there risking your lives for us. Thank you for standing the watch over us here at home so we can sleep safely at night. And everyone else out there, ask yourself that question. What are you capable of being? What are you capable of being? And are you doing everything in your power to be the most capable human being you can be? I know when I ask myself that question, I know the answer. I know I can do more. I know I can. We can all do more. And that starts each and every day by getting up, going on the attack, and getting after it. And until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.